Tonight, it's time for the Secret Six, aka we gave a bunch of D-listers a book and we hope that'll sell. Grayson does the best desert scenes I've ever seen, Eat Your Heart Out, Dune. And honestly, I'm surprised it's taken this long for Aquaman and the others to spend half an issue talking about the glory of the former Soviet Union. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 170 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we got a lot of comics today, so I'm not going to do anything here at the intro. I will say I have an extremely sore throat, just seasonal cold, allergies, stuff like that. And this episode has been an ordeal for me. I am in a lot of pain. So forgive me if I'm keeping this brief at the beginning and ending here. Anyway. In terms of comics we've got coming out this week, in alphabetical order this time, because I accidentally printed my sheet out wrong, we have Action Comics, Aquaman and the Others, Batman Eternal, Detective Comics, Earth 2 World's End, Gotham Academy, Grayson, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Justice League 3000, Lobo, New 52 Future's End, Secret Six, Sinestro, and Swamp Thing. Anyway, what is important out of that? Well, Sinestro and Green Lantern are part of the Godhead event, and then we've got a brand new number one, which is, of course, Secret Six, written by Gail Simone. Everything else is just kind of normal issue stuff. So, don't really have much more to add on top of that. I am going to cough in about 6 seconds, so let's get into the first comic. Secret Six, number one, written by Gail Simone, art by Ken Lashley. So, brand new book. Not entirely sure what it was going into it, but we open up in New Mexico at a small little bar called Rusty Red's, and we see some agents are approaching it, led by an Agent Robbins. And as they get inside, they see, a woman singing. She's doing a little bar routine. And as they look around, they're trying to figure out who their target is, and they see, as they call him, the Smolder Boy over in the corner. Now, at no point in this book do they actually give this character his name. They do call him Thomas Blake, but it's Catman. I don't know if that's supposed to be a surprise later on in this story, but it's Catman. So if I say Catman, just know that's that. So he's flirting with both a dude and a chick over in the corner, and all of a sudden the agents come in saying like, oh, we're from the ATF, we need to arrest you. And he's like, all right. And it's like, oh, all right, cool, we didn't expect you to do that. But then he says no cuffs, and they're like, oh, well, what happens if we insist on the cuffs? And he jumps up from the table, immediately grabs one of them, taking him off guard with how fast he's moving. And he's like, oh, well, if you're going to force me into cuffs, if you're going to force me to be confined, then I'm going to mess you up so bad that you're never going to walk right again. And then I'm going to spray your face to mark you as my property. And he throws the guy down and says, also, by the way, you idiots all have the same badge number. So these are not real agents. We see one calling in saying that the target's gone wrong or whatever. And he starts turning their own guns on each other, just straight up fighting them as hard as he can. And he says, all right, never come here again. And he throws them around a whole bunch. And as the agents are running towards a phone booth in order to place a call saying, hey, send backup, send help, send everyone, he tackles through the phone booth and manages to kill the ATF agent. And we see a woman come up saying, hey, rough boy, you're super hot, but sorry about this. And I'm sorry, it's hard to tell. It looks like a taser, but like one that maybe sets him on fire. I don't know. Regardless, he's out. The woman, turns out, is also part of the group. And she says, all right, pay off all the witnesses here, and then let's get the cuffs on him, because I want him to know exactly whose property he is. So we see him, then we cut to a dark room. He's surrounded by a few other people in shadows, and he wakes up, shoots up, and he sees this woman who's not very conservative with the way she's sitting, considering she's wearing a dress, and he gets a good eyeful, and she's like, you know, it's impolite to stare. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, but like, I feel like I'm going to be sick. And this big dude shows up and he's like, hey, yeah, we all feel that way. They pumped us full of drugs. Here, use the bucket. So he throws up into it. We see there are, including him, 5 other people in this room. The Secret Six. And one of them's just like, oh, hey, you don't know where he's been, big shot. You might want to step away. And she's like, oh, or he's like, oh, I definitely don't know that, mister. And she takes offense to that because he's like, I'm a girl. Better not say anything you can't take back in here. So the big guy whose name is Big Shot says, hey, let me give you the grand tour. And then he says, all right, that's the tour. It's just like a blank room. It's a perfect square. That's all it is. And he pulls out a flask and starts drinking from it, just being like, you want any of this? No? Okay. The woman is before, I mean, it's hard to say that. All right. To go through the character stuff in a minute here, I'm just going to say it. Ventriloquist, Porcelain, whose ability is to turn any hard object brittle. We have Strix, who came from the Batgirl and Birds of Prey book. That is a former Talon with the Court of Owls. Big Shot is a private investigator, and also he can sometimes, quote-unquote, swell up. And I believe there's one more. Is that all the ones I said? Porcelain? Oh, and Black Alice, who has some sort of magic powers in the vein of Zatanna. She uses backwards talk. So anyway, as they're standing there and Catman's trying to figure out, like, what is going on, all of a sudden there is this voice over an intercom that says, no, subjects will not attempt to lead the experiment. Any attempt to dismantle the apparatus will be met with penalty. And then all of a sudden, the 5 other members jump up onto some stools in the middle because the floor is electrified. And Catman gets zapped, and Big Shot's like, sorry, I should have warned you. They like to do that occasionally. But then up on the wall pops a sentence. It says, what is the secret? And Catman's like, what is that about? And he's like, I don't know, that part's new. So Catman then reveals, like, hey, look, I really don't do well in confined spaces. I need to get out of here. Bad things will happen if I'm kept in this sort of space. So the intercom overhead says, you have 15 minutes to answer the question or severe penalties will be imposed. Open the locked containers in front of you with the combination 1114. So they open up the thing in front of them, and they find 6 masks, all corresponding with their own masks. And then inside as well is the dead body of Agent Robbins, who has been cut up here. And Catman's like, oh, well, guess he got a bad performance review. So at that point, Catman's like, all right, screw the question. I'm getting out of here. Anyone else in? And we see Porcelain's like, yep, totally, I'm in. And she breaks his cuffs using her powers and says, yeah, I got caught robbing a bank, so that's what I'm up to. Ventriloquist introduced herself, and Catman's like, okay, well, she's crazy, so let's just go ahead and bail on that one. Big Shot introduces himself as the PI. He doesn't know what he's doing here at all, especially with a bunch of criminals. Strix writes down on pieces of paper because she can't talk. She says, I am Strix. I kill people. And Catman's like, all right, cool. And what about you? And she's like, I'm Black Alice. Don't talk to me. And she's like, okay, but what can you do? And she's like, I can do anything I want. And he's like, well, can you get us out of here? And he gets right up in her face, and she shouts off in get the hell off in magic speak. And he's like, all right, fair enough, but we're going to die in here if you don't do something. And she's like, or what, Cat Fancy? So Big Shot holds back Catman to make sure he doesn't do anything else. Catman kind of gets a little bit pissed at Big Shot, slashes his face, and he's like, all right, not a fan of that. So he swells up in size, grabs hold of Catman, slams him against the wall, which causes a crack to form. And through that crack comes in salt water. And Catman realizes, oh God, it's ocean water. We are buried at sea. For the love of God, get me out of here. And he starts freaking out. He's just like, oh, let go of me. I'll kill every one of you to get out of here. Da, da, da. And then the voice over the intercom says, you now only have 2 minutes to answer. Subjects will choose which subject will be terminated. And they're like, whoa, hold on. We get to pick which one of us dies? Which one of us 6? And Ventriloquist chimes in saying, excuse me, 7. You miscounted earlier. And she reaches into her bag and pulls out her ventriloquist dummy, Ferdy, who says, hey, are those stubby pencils in your pockets, or are you just happy to see me? All right, well, here's the thing. I know just because I've been reading this entire New 52, I am aware of Strix. Black Alice seems familiar, but I think that's only because of a modern comic they used her recently. I don't think I've actually seen her in New 52. And then, who was the last one who... Oh, Ventriloquist, obviously. She had a whole thing over in Batgirl. So, yeah. Gail Simone's pulling from what she knows, using a couple of her older characters, and obviously setting up newer ones here. They've got me with the Saw aspect. I'm interested to see where that goes. I can't say it's not a good mystery going on, but yeah, it's definitely off the wall right now. I'm curious to see how it all ties together and makes it for a decently well-lasting series throughout the cutoff point of the Convergence event. This managed to make it past that, which a lot of miniseries did not end up doing. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes from here, but ultimately this one, I'm going to give I'll give it an 8. I think it's a solid start. Sinestro number 7, written by Cullen, Bunn, art by Ethan Van Sciver. So this is the next part of the Godhead story, and I don't even know what happened last time. I think it was Red Lanterns. Doesn't really impact this at all. So we open up on New Genesis, where Highfather now has the life equation. He got it from Kyle Rayner. And he's talking to his new gods, and they're all like, awesome, dude. We're finally going to do this. We're going to take all the lanterns, and we're going to capture them all in order to make them into your soldiers. And then we're going to go out and fight Darkseid. And he's like, yep, we're going to set a trap for them, and everything's going to be cool. But we cut over to Sector 1014, maybe 1074, hard to tell, where Becca of the New Gods is commanding her army, and she's the one that, like, they're all due for her love and whatnot. And apparently they got attacked by a bunch of space pirates, and they're like, haha, we took them out easily. And Becca's like, yeah, that was, like, way too easy, though, so this was nothing but a nuisance. And that's where Sinestro pops up in Yellow Lantern construct, and he's like, yeah, hi, I'm the one who hired the space pirates just to basically attack you. That's, like, they were stupid and dumb, and, like, you were totally going to kill them the whole time. And she's like, oh, what? Lantern, you want to come at me? Is that what it is, huh? Come on, come out, fight me like a man. And he's like, nah, I'm just going to keep on playing my stupid little games here. After all, you new guys just see us as children, right? So, like, I shouldn't be any sort of threat to you, but you have to understand that the whole reason that I sent all of those space pirates after you is because I just love seeing you work. You really know how to instill fear in people, let me tell you. So Becca's just basically arguing against him and sends out a bunch of her soldiers to go find where he is. Wherever in the universe he's hiding, go sniff him out. So meanwhile, we see that in the antimatter universe, John Stewart is talking to Sinestro, just like, hey man, you listening? You focusing here? Yeah, we got a whole situation here. We need to figure out what we're supposed to do next. And Sinestro's like, you're welcome, by the way. I mean, you know, you never said thank you for allowing you all to come to the antimatter universe and live here on my planet and whatnot. And John Stewart's like, dude, shut up. Look, we got a whole big thing. Lanterns are dying left and right. The gods are kidnapping them. We don't even know where Kyle is. This is a whole big thing. And someone's got to lead the Green Lanterns. And Sinestro's like, oh my God, you think that's you? You are like the third lantern in line behind Hal and Guy. And John's like, Guy is not in front of me. He's like, well, that's not what Guy Gardner says. Anyway, do you have a plan? And he's like, yeah, you know, I got some ideas. Let's use the Indigo Tribe. They can teleport. The New Gods were scared of them and, like, wanted to capture them first for a reason. Clearly, they are the things that we should be using here. So let's go in and let's bring their fears to light. You should appreciate that, Sinestro. So as this is going on, this conversation, we see that the Green Lanterns and the Yellow Lanterns are not exactly seeing eye to eye, and they start battling it out. We see that Sornik comes in and tries to stop the fighting, and she's talking to Iolande. It's just like, it's like old times, right? And Iolande's like, yeah, you're kind of a Yellow Lantern now, though. And she's like, what? No, I'm not. I've been held kidnapped here. Like, I haven't defected. I'm just entirely here doing my own thing. And then, as she says this, one of the Yellow Lanterns is like, you said you were with us. You've betrayed us. We've accepted you in the Sinestro Corps, and you betrayed us. And then Sornik just blasts her away, just being like, okay, but, like, he doesn't speak. That's not what's actually happening. Look, I may be fraternizing with them, but the Korrigarians are my people, and Sinestro is my... And then all of a sudden, Druk jumps in, just like, oh, betrayal. I see how it is. You are not part of the Green Lanterns either. And he's just like, God, all right, whatever. So she finishes saying, Sinestro is my responsibility. If you don't understand that, well, the hell with all of you. So at that point, Arkillo jumps in and is like, Sorenix, cool. She's an ambassador for Sinestro, and to disrespect her is to disrespect Sinestro, and how dare you disrespect Sinestro? And Sorenix like, oh, cool. Arkillo's got my back. That's exactly what I needed to fix this situation. So Arkillo gets attacked by a bunch of Green Lanterns, and then Sinestro shouts him, or sorry, not Sinestro. John Stewart shouts them all down, just like, hey, enough. We got a war going on. We need as many men as we can get. None of you are going to be fighting each other because we've all got this bigger cause we're going for. And everyone just kind of like pauses for a moment looking up at him. And John turns to Sinestro, is like, anything you want to add? And he's like, yeah, Yellow Lanterns. Next person to attack a light bearer is going to get personally disciplined by me. Yeah, that's all I need to say here. So at that point, we see back with Becca, Sinestro's construct is just like, hey, look, you may find some Lanterns who would have joined your cause to fighting in Stark's side. I mean, I wouldn't, but like you may have had some. But instead you went in and you fought us all, and like now you're totally going to lose against all of us. And she's like, why are you still following me? Why are you still even here? And she's like, ask. If you wanted to get away from me, you could have like boom tubed out and I wouldn't be able to find you. So yeah, you want to listen to me. You want to hear what I have to say. And she's like, oh, you're quite confident, aren't you? And he's like, yeah. Because I have a plan. And he fades away the construct, and we see inside of it is a Yellow Lantern ring that says, Becca of New Genesis, you have the ability to instill great fear. So back on the Antimatter universe, we see John and Sinestro basically saying, all right, here's the plan. Indigo Tribe's going to teleport us in. We're going to grab a new god as a hostage. We're going to take their boom tube technology, and then we're going to use that to like really get under their skin. That's the plan. Cool, cool. And everyone's in on it. And so Indigo Tribe teleports them, and as the smoke clears from the teleportation, they realize they're all trapped in a giant space prison. And Sinestro's like, Indigo Tribe, did you just betray us? And they just go, knock. And then we see that Orion of New Genesis and his little mini squad are all there saying, oh, well, you've got one chance to give yourselves peacefully, or else we're going to paint the walls with your blood. So, oopsie. This does directly continue into Green Lantern, number whatever it is, 37. Yeah, it's forward progress. I'll give it that. It gives the Becca storyline an interesting swerve. Didn't expect her to be inducted into Yellow Lanterns. If she does, that is. God knows she could turn it down. In terms of the Indigo Tribe betraying them, didn't see that coming. I wonder what's going on in the background there. But beyond that, solid story. I don't think I really have much more to add on top of it besides it's doing something, and that's more than what a lot of these chapters I felt like have actually done. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5 and call it a day. Green Lantern number 37, written by Robert Venditti, art by Francis Portela and Scott McDaniel. So this is continuing Godhead. Previously over in Sinestro, the core of both Yellow and Green found themselves trapped in a space prison by the Indigo Tribe, and we open up with that of them basically saying like, God, I thought Indigo Tribe was cool. I thought they were on the nice side. Why are they acting more like Yellow Corps? And Sinestro's just like, you idiots. You think there's friends in war? There are no such thing as allies. And John's like, well, then I guess we can just leave here without you. So John uses a construct trying to make like a ladder out of the space prison, because it does just have an open top, and it fails. The thing says energy detected, counteracting, and it just shoots the energy back into the ring. So then Sinestro's just like, all right, bro, let me show you how a real lantern does it. And he frees the parallax entity from inside himself, which then the computer says energy detected, and it shoots it back into his body again. And Saint Walker, who's there, is like, I'm sorry, bro, did you just have the entity of fear inside yourself? And Stewart's like, I'm sorry, you had something you wanted to say about like showing us up? Is that something you want to say? And he's like, all right, screw you, man, because you do not understand the level of screwed we're at if the fear entity is able to be fought back. So we cut back to Earth, where we last left Hal trying to convince Black Hand to join in the fight. We see he's at the circus and is surrounded by zombies, and Hal's just built a little cage to protect himself. And Hal's like, you don't understand it, Earth's in danger. And Black Hand's like, yeah, it's like the 12th time that's happened. Like, we should just let this planet die, man. This is pretty obviously what's going to happen to it. But he's like, all right, look, just what is it going to take you to understand here? And he's like, oh, well, hold on. You're interrupting me. Let me show you the thing I get built up here. And he brings in Hal Jordan's dad as a zombie. And he's like, yeah, look at this. I've been saving this one for a rainy day. And Hal's like, Dad, oh my God, are you in there? Jesus Christ, man. And he blasts open the cage, pushing back the zombies just enough to get Black Hand into the cage, and he's like, all right, man, too far. You pushed me too. I've killed you plenty of times. I'm thinking one of these times it's actually going to stick. And Black Hand's like, yeah, whatever. So Hal's like, look, I don't have time for this. There is a major war going on. There's this thing called the life equation, and if they get to do what they want to do, it's all over, man. And Black Hand's like, I don't like the term life equation. That sounds bad to me. Is there going to be a lot of dying? And Hal's like, no, there's going to be a lot of nothing. Everything's just going to be gone. It's not going to be death or anything. It's just going to be nothingness. And Black Hand's like, all right, I'm not a fan of that either. So what you're talking about, is this like a real war? Like one of the cool wars? Because I used to stay up late at night watching History Channel, and my parents thought that like I was a history buff, but I'm not. I just like the bodies. And Hal's like, man, you're messed up. But like, yes, it is going to be one of those. It's going to be a space war. And Black Hand's like, awesome, zombies, go out into the town. Hal, let's get going. And he's like, bro, you do understand that, like, we're not friends here. We're going to be fighting once this is done because you brought my dad back from the dead. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So as they're flying, Black Hand kind of gives his philosophy of life is necessary for death. Life, the whole thing of life is procreation and self-preservation, one of which makes more things that can die, the other which forces other people to kill each other. So everything about life is super cool for Black Hand, and they all come back to him in the end. So we go back to the prison that Orion is looking over. He gets a alert that there are some lanterns over at the source wall at the same place that they had their previous fight. So he's like, all right, squad, come with me. Let's go over there. And as they arrive, we cut over to Green Lantern and Black Hand, which are waiting there for Sinestro to show up. This was the plan, that he was going to show up with a boom tube here. But clearly, since he's been imprisoned, ain't going to happen. And Black Hand's looking at the source wall, and he's like, man, this place looks awesome. This is super cool looking. It's like all these guys look like they're dead. So Orion shows up, and he's like, hey, I let you go the last time. Maybe you should have really taken the hint there. Like, now I'm going to definitely kill you. And Black Hand's like, hey, man, what's on the other side of this wall? And Green Lantern's like, dude, could I please get you to focus for like a quarter second here? So at this point, Orion busts through Green Lantern's shield, and he starts bad-mouthing Black Hand, saying like, life equation. Now that we've got it, you guys are pretty much hung up to dry. And Black Hand's like, I don't think I want that. So he unleashes the spirits of a bunch of dead Green Lanterns, to which Hal is like, why would you do that? You know that I'm a Green. Why would you specifically choose them? And he's like, oh, I thought you'd like to fight alongside some familiar faces. So they actually managed to do some heavy work on the New Gods as Hal is punching out Orion. They take out a bunch of the squad, but one of them gets too close to the source wall, and his cape touches it, and it starts engulfing him and starts entirely surrounding him. And Black Hand looks at that, and he's like, oh my God, the wall. It's a mass grave. Oh my God, this is the best thing to ever happen. And we see Orion is being choked out by a bunch of Black Lanterns, but as Black Hand loses his attention, concentration, whatever, they all disintegrate, and Orion is now back on Hal Jordan with his remaining army there as Black Hand is distracted by the wall. So I like the writing. I think Black Hand is written well. He's got this dark sense of humor to him. Like, he's written in a comedic style, but ultimately it's sick and twisted things he's talking about. And I love Hal's reactions as well. Like, just when you think Hal is finally like, yeah, I get it, I know your shtick. Like, Black Hand pulls something on him, and he's just like, why would you do that? Please stop doing that. Oh, God. So, no, it's very well written. I don't think I really have any major flaws with it. No, art's fine, writing's fine. Yeah, no, it's a perfectly decent book. All in all, I think it's a little bit rushed in places. It just feels like a very fast-paced book, but there's nothing wrong with that for an event like this. So I'm going to say this one is a 8, and we'll end it with that. Detective Comics number 37, written by Brian Buccellato and Francis Manapul, art also by Francis Manapul. So this is beginning the new arc that is definitely anarchy, because page 1 we open up with anarchy saying, I know who you really are, I know what you did to them, you destroyed so many futures. And we see he's talking to this man that is up in a high-rise that he's doused with gasoline. He lights a match, sets him on fire, and pushes him out the window. And he says, it's time to show your true face, Lester, because Gotham's going to do the same soon. So we cut to the East End waterfront on Christmas Eve, where Mad Hatter, along with Tweedledum and Tweedledee, is looking for his Alice, and he's just yelling out at a homeless camp, oh, scurry into their holes, get me my Alice, do whatever it takes. And Tweedledum and Tweedledee grab a homeless man. Mad Hatter starts interrogating him, saying, like, tell me where she is, tell me where. And he's like, I swear to God, I have no idea who you're talking about. And he's like, oh, that's BS. You had your chance. Now I'm not going to show you any mercy. And as he is about to cut this guy's throat, Batman swoops in, kicks Mad Hatter in the face. Tweedledum and Tweedledee, as they're about to attack, get retracted by grappling hooks up to the Batwing. And Mad Hatter's like, seriously, or sorry, Batman's like, Mad Hatter, seriously, this is even a low for you. Like, this is Christmas Eve and these people have been through enough. And he goes and attacks Batman with a knife, which obviously doesn't go well. Batman flips him over, but because it's the waterfront, he flips him onto some thin ice. The ice cracks, and Mad Hatter ends up accidentally revealing a bunch of skulls that were hidden beneath the ice. So sometime later, Bruce is at the Batcave. He's doing analyzing on the skulls, and he says there are 5 adolescents, but there's a bunch of other like fragments and pieces that were found. So there's probably a lot more skulls just besides these, and they have been down there for years. He says at least 6. So they are trying to reference the missing children's database, trying to find something else. And he questions, like, did Mad Hatter do this? Is this something that like he's actually capable of? Like, these were just children. And Alfred's like, look, it's Christmas Eve. This is going to take a while. How about you get changed out of your costume and have a little bit of Bruce time? And so he does, but he tells Alfred, like, don't call it Bruce time. It makes it seem like I'm schizophrenic. And he's like, oh, no, of course you are. Dude, I understand it's important for you to be Batman. And, like, back when you were a kid, you had that choice taken away from you. And nowadays, you don't think you have a choice to stop anymore. I've accepted that. I deal with that. But you do still have that choice. And Alfred lights up Wayne Manor with Christmas lights and says, Merry Christmas, Master Bruce. So we then cut to the GCPD, where Detective Yip and Detective Bullock are looking for they're looking at a big map and they're discussing, oh, it's the end of the year. We've had like 700 murders in Gotham for over the past year, and it's been like high, like even by Gotham standards. And Bullock is just happy that once they start the new year, you know, we wipe that number clean and we have a chance to do better next year. But Yip is like, yeah, but all of those unsolved cases are going to go unsolved. They're going to become cold cases. And he's like, whatever, man, I'm more than happy to leave that in the past. And she's like, oh yeah? So why are you caring so much about the anarchy symbols that have been popping up around town? And friggin' Bullock goes into a Scott Snyder like Wikipedia rant of like, oh, well, you see, if they use white chalk, it means that the building was already taken down. It's something that they already did. But if it's red, that means it's a future target. And we found all these white ones around, but only one red one. And Yip jumps in just like, yeah, I can read Wikipedia too, bro. Also, if we've only found the one, maybe we should be doing something better else on Christmas Eve. And he's just like, all right, whatever. So at that point, they get interrupted by a cop who says, hey, there's been a murder at Wayne Tower. You should go check it out. And he's like, 701. Fantastic. So as they get there, they find Lester, the guy who was burned by anarchy. Lucius Fox is there saying like, hey, you're saying the security tapes didn't end up catching anything, but we don't think this was an inside job. We think that someone managed to hack into our systems. And Bullock's just like, all right, so who's this guy? And it's like, I don't know, he was quiet, he never was a big thing before, but apparently Bullock questioned him a few months ago about some human trafficking stuff that happened, so this guy was never quite on the up and up. We see that there was a picture of a child inside of his wallet that was not his, it was someone else, so it's most likely something to do with the human trafficking. So Bullock and Detective Yip get brought inside. Everything is just going chaotic in there. Everyone's scrambling around with computers. And Lucius is like, yeah, sorry, we've been having some system-wide crashes. We've been backing up all of like the government contracts and stuff like that, everything important. But it's fine. We got it. Don't worry about it. Here's his office. You can check it out if you want. So he's led in the office. Bullock sees on the computer that there is a loading bar that is very close to 100%, and he's like, what happens when it gets full, man? And that's where Batman shows up at the window. He's like, the whole building's gonna blow up. Bullock, of course, is not fond of Batman at this time. He's just like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Oh, he pulls out his gun, aims at Batman. He's like, nah, man, look, he's got control of these supervisory control and data acquisition systems, which apparently are enough for taking down the building. So he's like, yeah, we gotta deal with this. Harvey, I'm a bit confused at this point. Harvey seems to fire a shot at Batman, but misses from like point blank. And we see Batman throws a batarang into a fire alarm. And therefore he's like, look, this will start people for evacuating. That's the most they could do. You help guide them out. I'll try to slow things down on the computer. It's already at 91%. We see people trying to get out. However, because somebody's hacked in, they have controlled the entirety of the electronic systems, which includes the doors. So everyone's stuck inside. And as Batman's trying to deal with this, we see he repels out the building. He's unable to stop it. He repels down out the building, and the entire building explodes in the shape of a giant A. So I don't know if he was successful or if that was the plan, or is this even Batman? I'm confused at this point, but it's okay. Like, it's a fine setup, the mystery's fine, but I'm just having flashbacks to the previous arc where it felt like it was biting off a bit more than it could chew and it wasn't explaining nearly enough. And I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I think that it does have the ability to deal with whatever it's doing, but I just am concerned because those last 2 or 3 pages were not straightforward, and I don't feel like I understood what happened. So hopefully they can explain it a little bit better. Overall, though, I think this one is... It's a 7 if I'm looking at it objectively, but I'm going to bump it to a 7.5 just because the art looks real pretty. I do enjoy Francis Manapul art. So yeah, 7.5 for this. Gotham Academy number 3, written by Becky, Cloonan, and Brendan Fletcher, art by Karl Kerschl. So, last issue, Pommeline and Heathcliff went to some secret society thing with the Diary of Millie Jane. Olive caught them, got the book back. The whole room was set on fire. It was very intimidating. This issue picks up immediately following, where some staff managed to find the fire. They come in with buckets of water and immediately douse it. And Olive gets detention for the whole situation. And she's describing what happened to Colton Rivera, who's also there, because obviously he's just a bad kid. So Colton says, hey, you're the reason I got busted. I need you to help me break into the headmaster's office to get my supplies back. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I heard you and Kyle broke up. And she's like, what? I don't, And then all of a sudden there's this scream from across campus. It's her roommate, Lucy. And we see that Pommeline is pointing out that there is a ghost floating around. And they're just catching the edges of it. And they say, if you let me finish my ceremony, then it wouldn't be here. That's the ghost of Millie Jane. And Lucy faints because of it. And I was just like, okay, what are you getting at here? What are you doing? And she's just like, no, seriously, that's the Cobblepots deemed her uncontrollable in life, and now she's uncontrollable in death as well. And we summoned her, and we were trying to bind her to something, but like, you interrupted us. And she's like, seriously? Is that what you were doing in your stupid Batman cult? And it's just like, it's the Order of the Bat, thank you. And it's not a cult. It's a secret society. So at that point, the headmaster and Milo are talking, and they don't see the girls there because they go and hide, and they say, oh, keep the children away from the North Hall. I don't want this getting out. And Pommeline's like, all right, meet me in the chapel after class. So after class, Olive brings the diary, meets up with Pommeline, and she's like, hey, look, you got detention for a week and you didn't snitch on us, so I guess to some extent we're a little bit cool, but like, yeah, I also don't actually know what really happened there. So they read through the diary, they realize there's no connection to the North Hall. They have no idea why she would be haunting around there. However, Maps did see something on the day of the assembly, and that was, the ghosts that were being seen outside the dorm window as well. So there's definitely stuff going on here. And Pommeline thinks, well, maybe I summoned the wrong ghost. Like, what name was she buried under? And Olive's like, she wasn't buried under a name. It was unmarked except for a weird symbol. And Olive puts forward, hey, what if she didn't go crazy after all? What if she just knew too much? What if it was all conspiracy? So they question who is actually in Millie Jane's grave. And at that point, Heathcliff walks up. Pommeline gets pissed off because he wasn't answering texts or calls. And she's like, oh, sorry, there's a new album that was dropped. I just had to give it a listen. So Pommeline storms off. And Heathcliff's like, man, I just wanted to like me. And I was like, I don't get why, but fair enough. If you're a good guy, Heathcliff, if you ever want to study again, I'm cool with that. And at that point, Kyle comes up and says, hey, Olive, we got to talk. Let's go. So they go down to a nearby pier. And Kyle's like, hey, I've missed you. Like, you just dropped off the face of the earth. Nobody could reach you. I thought you hated me. Like, what's happening? Talk to me. And Olive's like, look, I didn't mean to. And I've been meaning to tell somebody, but it's my mom. She was in a hospital for a while, and that hospital collapsed last summer. So now she's in a coma, and the doctors say she may not wake up again. Obviously, for anyone keeping up in continuity, it's Arkham. She was in Arkham. So we say that Kyle's like, okay, look, you need some space. I get it. I'm always going to be here for you. And you could break my heart if you need to, but like, stick around just for Maps' sake. She really likes you. So we then cut to later that evening as she's walking home, and Maps jumps out and says like, hey, here's a bunch of snacks. I've missed the ghost too many times now, so we're going to stake out and we're going to catch it. So they go up on the roof of one of the buildings. They set up a little tent. And Maps is like, all right, so I've charted everywhere where the ghosts have been seen. I've cross-referenced it based off who's reliable. We see Olive finds a little coin for the band that Heathcliff was listening to, so she just tucks that away in her pocket. We then have Maps going through saying, like, okay, is there any other places that we should keep an eye on? And she's like, oh, the teachers know something about the North Hall. That's something going on. And she looks out with her binoculars and sees a blonde kid who she says she saw before. I don't remember that. And she's like, oh, well, he's reading a book. What are you reading? And the guy, who should be too far away to respond, holds up the book cover for like her to blatantly see. And it's just like, wait a minute, hold on. Can he hear me? So at that point, Maps looks over at the North Hall, gets Olive's attention. They see a pair of glowing eyes inside, and they're like, oh God, we got to get in there. To which Pommeline is already on the roof, just like, well, I know the guy just for the job. So the next morning, Maps goes out to the teacher's parking lot and does a little stealth mission to deliver a note to, I just had his name, Colton, that's it. As he's trying to steal stuff out from under the headmaster's car, and he opens the note and it says like, oh, heist tonight, North Hall, break in, we need a lockpick, you're up. So we see they meet at the fountain later that night, and Colton's like, I was thinking this is some kind of prank, but like, if you guys are actually up for this, totally cool. And they call him out for still wearing his sunglasses at night, and he's like, oh, these things they got infrared vision. And Maps was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. And I was like, he's a liar, don't listen to him, let's go. So they make their way over to the North Hall that's been all boarded up. We do see a bolt of lightning, and Olive thinks she sees Batman up top, and she's like, no, it's fine, everything's cool. So they make their way in. Colton lockpicks, no problem. And Olive is just like, something's really familiar about this place. I don't know what it is. So as they go inside, Colton's like, look, you guys do whatever you want in here, but I'm just going to start stealing stuff like finders keepers. And as they start looking around, we see that Olive comes to the realization that this is where it happened. This is where the bad thing that she remembers happened. And we see visions of a fire going on and then Batman inside the fire. So Pommeline snaps her out of it, saying like, hey, we're here to hunt a ghost, right? Like, come on, let's go. And she's like, no. There's something in here with us. We got to go. And Pommeline's like, of course it's the ghost of Millie Jane. Let's go. So Colton calls them all over because he's found a giant hole in the floor, and it looks like it's something new. It's not something that was made by like the fire damage. It's a hole that's existed here before, and it's been marked with some sort of sigil on the side. Pommeline pulls out her phone to try to see what's down in the bottom, but she ends up dropping it, and she's like, whatever, I got 2 more in my dorm room, it's fine. And Olive calls her out, just being like, man, you're lucky to even have one of those. I don't have any. I was just going to take yours if you don't care about it. And she reaches down into the hole, and then all of a sudden she says something has got her arm, and as she recoils, we see a slimy green hand reaching up from the bottom, and Maps yells to run. Okay, positives. Interesting mystery. I like the stuff they're doing with Olive. They did actually reveal in a different book, I'm not going to say which, just for spoiler's sake, the deal with Olive's mother. So that's already on the, in continuity has been established at that point. I do think that the mysteries going on, both for the Ghost and also Olive, they're very interesting. I'm super into both of them. Downsides, I had to make a list of all the characters' names because they did not do a good job of reminding me, especially of Pommeline. Dear Lord, that is not a normal name. You need to have people saying her name constantly until that gets drilled into my head. Beyond that, it's not a bad story. I'm definitely up for more. I'd say this one's probably... I'm going to say it's a 7. It's a little bit scatterbrained at times. I'm a little bit like that part where they were talking about, oh, what if Millie Jane was actually like, it was a conspiracy? Like, I don't know how that ties into. I'm sure it's going to come back for the mystery in the end, but it didn't feel like it was natural, like at that point in the story. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7, and we'll see if it can't get any better in future issues. Grayson number 5, written by Tom King and Tim Seeley, art by Mikel, Janin. So we just opened full-on in media res here. We have a helicopter that's fallen out of the sky. Grayson is on the inside along with Helena and Midnighter, who apparently led Argus to this location accidentally. Like, he was searching for Grayson, or Spiral as a whole. He accidentally led Argus to their plane. Their plane got hit by an EMP from Argus, and that's why it's now falling out of the sky. Also, there's a pregnant woman who's giving birth on the inside, and she has one of these super organ things that Spiral's been hunting down. So they're helping her give birth as this Helena's trying to make sure that this plane does not fall out of the sky. Ultimately, though, there's only so much she can do, and it crash lands in the desert. The baby is born, but the mother unfortunately dies. And now they are in the middle of African Sahara. There is apparently the nearest house, or the nearest place, 200 miles away, and there's nothing more that they can do there. And Grayson's like, look, we're not dead. And Helena goes through the supplies, finds there's baby formula and some water, a few more things. And Midnighter's like, it's not enough, we're dead. And he's like, no, we've got this baby. As long as the baby's alive, we're alive, so let's walk. And from here on, the most I can say is that this is a masterclass in visual storytelling and pacing, because, like, barely a thing is said, but the story continues on. So the group walk across the desert. We see the baby being fed. Midnighter casts off his heavier leather gear. It turns out Helena was actually injured during the crash, so she's grasping at her side because she keeps on losing some blood. Day 2. More marching, more going through. Grayson and Midnighter seem to be doing okay, but Helena is definitely not doing awesome. We see on the night of the second day, Midnighter's like, hey, look, we're not going to make it, but that kid has the heart. You know it, I know it, and the heart has energy that we could use. If we let the kid die, we'll survive. And Dick doesn't even acknowledge Midnighter, just like, feeding the baby, just saying like, oh, shush, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And Midnighter stands up saying like, look, if you don't want to do it, just give her to me. I know who you are now, Dick Grayson. And Dick looks up and he's like, yeah, I know you. When Argus's EMP went off, it took out your hypnos stuff as well. So I see you. And because of that, my powers kick in. I know how to fight you. I know everything that you're going to do. And Helena manages to get the drop on him, hold a knife against the throat, being like, yeah, did you see this coming? Look, if you don't want to walk, stay here and bleed, but we're not hurting that kid. So, day 3, the walk continues. Midnighter points out that Helena's not doing well. We see her stumbling along, and on day 4, she does end up collapsing in the desert. Grayson goes back and tries to get her up, saying like, hey, come on, you can keep moving. And she's like, no, I can't. Look, the kid's more important. Don't waste the water on me. It's for the baby. Just remember, this is all for her. And Grayson pulls the shirt off of his back, sets up a little makeshift tent, and says, look, we'll come back but like, we got to keep walking. So we see Midnighter call him out, just being like, oh, well, you think you're so high and mighty, but what happens when you get that baby to spiral? You think they're going to let her keep the heart? Look, I'm just trying to do what is going to eventually happen to the kid later. We all know that you're going to fail. And Grayson just turns around and backhands Midnighter and says, hurry up, you're slowing us down. Day 5 comes up, and Midnighter's like, hey, we should fight. Day 6, we fight, I win, I'll take the baby. Day 7, we should collapses down to the ground, says fight. And Midnighter's like, I can't do this. I know you. I see what's coming. I have my powers. I have my enhancements. You're Dick Grayson. What do you even have? And Dick sets down a canteen of water in the hill, leaving it for Midnighter. And he says, I have her. So day 8, we see Grayson sitting, talking to the baby. And he's just like, oh, I had a dream once. I was on this other planet. It was Batman, and I was Robin, and there was a tree wrapped around him. It was killing him, and I had to save him. And then Grayson collapses, and the baby starts crying, and he wakes back up again. He's like, shush, 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 it's okay, I'm here. And he continues on, day 9. And he's like, so yeah, I get Batman out of the tree, but then all the trees are coming after us. They're walking and crawling, and there's this purple monster, and it's got like 4 arms and pink eyes, and it's a whole thing, but it's like, we want it to fall into a ditch, but it's not falling for it. So I get up and I say to it, come on, big boy, I'm still waiting for you. And the monster gets mad and it falls in the ditch, and we end up winning. But then there are rocks everywhere, and they fall, and all I see is darkness after the rocks fall on me. But you got to forget about the rocks. It's you don't have to worry about the rocks anymore. Sometimes you just have to stand on the edge, and there's a monster on the other side, and you just got to tell him, come on, big boy, I'm still waiting for you. And we see Grayson once again collapses into the desert. Day 10, he's seemingly unconscious. The baby is still, goo-goo gagaing, when all of a sudden a 4x4 pulls up, and we see 2 guys get out of it, and it's like, oh my god, there's a baby, thank god, it's a miracle. And the other guy's just like, no, this is not God's doing. This man has managed to save this baby. This is only a man. And we see a week later, Grayson and Elena have been debriefed. They're recovering. They are back in spiral care. Mr. Minos is talking about all this. Midnighter was exchanged with Stormwatch to get one of their own agents back, Agent 19. And we then see him say, oh, it's a shame about the heart, though. It's a shame that it was lost in the crash. What a shame. We'll never know what secrets it's held. But then we see the baby, who is apparently under the care of whatever Middle Eastern family that was, African family, and they're saying, honey, have you seen my phone? It's like, oh, well, last I saw it, the baby, you had it with the baby. And we see the baby holding the mobile phone and then just crushing it in its hand, showing how powerful the heart superorgan is. And that is the issue. I have done a horrible, horrible job of explaining exactly what makes this issue so hauntingly beautiful. It is nothing but just wide shots of the desert and the characters just one by one dropping dead after they have done as much as they could. But overall, it's a great examination of how Dick Grayson, despite only being a man, quote unquote, is so much more than that when he's got the drive and determination to make something happen. So top tier storytelling. I'm going to give this one, honestly, a solid 9. I think that you could read this issue completely separate from the rest of everything else, and it's just fantastic storytelling. So, great work. Looking forward to the next part. Action Comics number 37, written by Greg Pak, art by Aaron Kuder. So, last issue, Superman got caught in a field wrapped around Smallville that keeps teleporting him to keep him inside, and also the people of Smallville are seemingly possessed by something. So we get Hero, aka Toy Master, coming up to Smallville driving in a sports car, and he's like, Superman, hey, I haven't heard you since you said you got inside the city. I'm coming in now. What's up? And he sees the whole big mist. And he says, Superman, do you hear me? And then he sees Superman flying towards him at like top speeds. And he's like, Hero, you got to get me out of here. And then as he's about to collide with the mist, he like spins out his car and teleports to the other side. And he's like, Superman, I teleported to the other side of the cloud just like you. And we see Superman still inside the cloud is still like flying at top speeds and keeps on teleporting to the opposite side of Smallville. And Hero's just like, that is so freaking cool. So eventually Superman's head just goes crazy. He ends up crashing in a cornfield. And the people of Smallville come up around him, and he's like, don't worry, something's attacking you, but I'll keep you safe. But he ends up passing out. So we then get a little memory sequence of Clark and Lana back when they're like, I don't know, 8 years old. And they're playing at school, and Lana doesn't know a secret yet, when all of a sudden outside the schoolyard is a cornfield that is caught on fire. And teacher calls all the kids inside, and Lana's like, oh, Clark, where's he? And Clark's like, look, I already know my stuff. I hear people out there. There's 4 people out in the cornfield that need help. So he runs out. He sees 3 of them, but someone was left behind. And he's like, okay, there's one behind the wall of fire. I can do this. But like, in order to stop this fire, it's going to take a whole new kind of power than like strength or anything like that. So he inhales deeply and then uses his super breath to try to blow out the fire. However, he doesn't have control of it yet. And in doing so, he just adds extra oxygen to the fire and makes an even bigger inferno. So he's like, oh God, what did I do? Jesus. And he sees a figure in the fire and says, Mister, don't worry, I'm going to save you. But the figure disappears, and we see behind him is some sort of purple skull mist. Whatever. Point being is he wakes up at that point and he's like, oh, geez, oh, God, my head hurts so much. And Steel's like, wow, I didn't know Superman ever got headaches. So, anyway, yeah, he's awake now, Lana. You can stop worrying. And she's like, I was never worried. This dude, like, flew to a black hole. He's fine. Smallville can't do anything to keep him down. And he's like, oh, God, but, like, why does my head hurt so much? And he's like, oh, well, we're picking up some unusual electrical activity similar to the electrical activity in the mist, at the edges of the mist, probably because you flew in and out of it 1,000 times in a row. And we see them then making their way outside of the clinic, and everyone in Smallville is acting like everything's totally fine. And Superman's like, why aren't they freaking out? And it's just like, I don't know, maybe because they know Superman's going to handle things. And Lana's just like, yeah, that's a good enough reason, I guess. And Steel points out, basically saying like, well, look, Peaceful Smallville have been through a lot. Doomsday died here. Brainiac did its whole thing. Also, remember when what's his name, Eradicator was here as well? Like, they kind of just have to keep rolling with the punches for this place, you know? And Lana's like, yeah, but, you know, that might be a bit too much blind faith in one person. And, like, turns to Superman. And Superman's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know. You're still upset that I couldn't save your parents. I get it. But something's wrong. This isn't right. Can we get any signals to the outside world? And everyone's like, nope, not at all. Totally locked down. He's like, well, I told Hero about it. He should be able to contact Batman. But Hero's a little bit special. Cut to Hero. He is jumping in and out of the mist, teleporting to the other side. He's like, oh my God, as soon as I can figure out how this works, I'm going to make $1 million, nay, $1 billion off of this. And as he's trying to leap through one more time, he is grabbed by a bunch of crazy-ass tentacles and dragged inside. So Superman gets in front of all the people. He's like, hey, everybody, thanks for being so weirdly calm. We're going to go ahead and deal with the cloud. So, we just need you all to stay indoors. Everyone cool with that? And everyone's like, yeah, Superman, no problem. We'll go ahead and do whatever. And Superman's like, okay, I can hear your heartbeats, and not a single one of you is freaked out by that, like, at all. What in the hell is going on? But all right, fine, sure. Everyone inside. So they all go inside, and they end up trying to lock down exactly where the electrical signature is coming from. They go realize that it's all around on all the edges, but there's also one dead center in the middle. And as they make their way to the center, they come across the crater that was formed when Superman fought Doomsday. And they bring up the point of not only was Doomsday here, he was teleported here to this location. So Superman then looks up at the sky, sees where this is where all the clouds are swirling to. There's a light up in the center, and he's like, well, I'm going to go touch it. I mean, clearly. And as he flies up, Lana's like, I wouldn't do that. And all the townspeople come out and say, yeah, you're a smart kid, Lana. And he's like, Mr. Santiago and crew, you all need to stay in town. And Santiago's just like, sorry, Lana, we've got our own stuff we got to do. And they start blasting Superman with psychic things of just no over and over again until he's down on the ground screaming in pain. Lana's like, what the hell are all you... Stop what you're doing. He's like, nope, sorry, gotta. Up in the sky, meanwhile, in that little light ball is Hero, who's being still attacked by a bunch of tentacles, calling out for Superman's help. Superman pushes through the pain, flies back up to go deal with it. Steel goes up to join him. These townspeople attack even harder, and they realize, like, man, Kryptonian's brain is hard. So he once again gets hit. Lana, meanwhile, comes in for the save and tases one of the townspeople, but it doesn't end up doing anything. She's only attacked as well. So everyone's being attacked by just constant barrages, like, no, 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 no. And Superman's like, I have to stop all of them at once. I could super breath them like I did before, but I know that, like, Mrs. Johnson's got osteoporosis and Mr. Henderson's got a heart condition. I can't knock them down that hard. And he flashes back to when he created that inferno. He didn't have control of his powers, but he's like, but I'm not a kid anymore. I do have control. And so he uses his breath. It is a lighter but still effective cold breath, and he manages to stop all of them in their tracks. So at that point, Steel and him pull open the space light, which is like a butthole. I don't want to sound crass, but it makes the sound of scorch when they stretch it open. So they see Heroes inside. Superman grabs a hold of him, and as he starts pulling him out, we see that there is a giant Cthulhu, crazy, beyond comprehension mist creature on the other side, and apparently it is controlling Hero and using him as a mouthpiece. Outside the mist, a bunch of kids are recording the mist that is now expanding. We see a bunch of cows are being caught up by the tentacles, and the kids are like, that's freaking awesome. And then they get caught up by the tentacles, and we see the giant mist creature says, oh, you little children, you're too safe in your soft world. Tell me, are you scared now? And we see a giant beast with this giant mist creature. It's horrific. Yeah. I like this one. I think it's I really like the creature. I think they did a fantastic job of drawing that. In terms of the Smallville residents being brought in by whatever mind-controlled thing's going on, it's fine. It's okay. I am a little bit flashing back to the Psy-War story arc of Superman, where that was just hot garbage, and it was a bunch of, like, mind-controlled people as well, but I'm trusting this will be handled a little bit better. It's not going to be stupid-ass Brainiac stuff. So, all in all, I'd say this is still very good. I'm going to give it I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't feel like it's quite at that 8 level, but it's still quite a decent book overall. Aquaman and the Others, number 8, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Lan Medina. So last issue, a team called Mayhem, made up of KGBs, Cheshire, and a bunch of D-listers, took over a bunch of Russian nukes, and they're figuring out how to use it. And then the subplot of Prisoner of War's, one of his ghosts that's attached to him knows that Operative is the one who killed him in life. So we pick up on that subplot. Prisoner of War is being possessed by the ghost, saying, oh, Operative killed me, and that for that he must die. And Yawara's like, that doesn't make any sense. You're alive, Prisoner of War. And he's like, no, I am a ghost. I am dead. And he launches after Yawara. Yawara just, like, flips him around, kicks him, and shoves him into the helicopter. And because he hits his head, he's like, what? Yawara? Where am I? What's happening? And everyone's like, is that you, Torres? And he's like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm good. But, like, what happened? And they say, like, oh, well, you were going through a traumatic experience. It was a whole thing. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I have a bunch of soldiers inside me. One of them named Gary seems to think that Operative killed him. And Aaron's there, and he's like, there's no way my grandfather killed an American soldier. And Yawara's like, yeah, no, that's clearly the craziest part of all that. So Aaron calls her out saying, like, you're wrong, whatever. And they question, like, hey, why are you guys even here? Yawara and whatever the woman's name is. And it's just like, oh, I had a vision. I saw torment and suffering and whatnot. We wanted to help you out. And just like, oh, yeah, you know, you see a lot of stuff, but you also saw that distant future of the frightening machine monsters. And she's like, yeah, still seeing that. Still a problem. But I'm hoping that it doesn't come to pass. Oh, you know, future's end and whatnot. So we then cut over to Mayhem, where this guy has the stupidest name. I can't remember. It's like NKV Demon or something like that. And he's like, yeah, we should use all the nukes right now. Let's make a statement. Let's do it. Let's fire them all off. And Cheshire jumps in being like, no, we're not going to do that. And KG Beast talks to the other people in there. They are Braze, Stranglehold, Maelstrom, and I guess that's it. And is like, yeah, I'm just going to let them fight it out. Like, that's the way I do my thing. It's enjoyment, it's entertaining and whatnot. So we see them fight it out, and Cheshire's like, look, we got to do this. We got to do it the right way. We can't do that by launching the nukes immediately. And NKV Demon's like, it is what Stalin would have wanted. Oh, KGB trained me that Mother Russia was the best, and now we should do that stuff as well. And Cheshire's like, NKV Demon, you're literally the worst. Shut up. We're not going to be doing that. So he pulls out a gun, aims it at Cheshire. That's where KGB steps in. It's just like, okay, let's call it right now. Well, she's right. We can't launch all the guns now. We got to do it at the proper time. All right. And so Cheshire and KGB get to talking, just being like, why is he even on the team? Why is NKV Demon here? And it's like, he's got some edge. I like that. And plus we have a bit of a history there. And she's like, fine, whatever. They talk about the operative. Apparently Cheshire has some history as well, but not with the operative, with his son instead. So that's the thing that happens. Maelstrom and Stranglehold get to talking. It almost seems like they're flirting in a lot of ways, but Maelstrom's just like, oh, I'm glad that we don't are not actually going to use the nukes. And Stranglehold's like, well, of course we're going to use them. We're just not going to use them right now. What do you think we were doing? We're just going to like make a lemonade stand? And she's like, oh, well, I wanted to make things better. That's the reason I joined Mayhem. And she's like, psh, don't be naive, kid. Things are going to get better for us, but worse for a whole lot of other people. So at that point, Cheshire asks KGB, he's like, what is she doing here? What is Stranglehold? She seems crazy as well. And he's like, I like her edge. And it's like, okay, that's a lot of edge for one team. It feels like the 90s up in here. And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Anyway, what do we know about Aquaman and the others? Shouldn't we do something that? It's like, oh, don't worry. They're going to come looking for us. They're do-gooders like that, and we can use that to our advantage. Tell me more about the one with the jetpack, aka Vostok. So we then go to the operative's home base somewhere in the Atlantic, and it's just like, okay, look, I'm just going to take a look at this CIA thing that I stole, and we're going to see what all they were after. And it's like, you stole that thing without even knowing about it? It's like, yeah, it was a job. Clearly, I don't do that. But now it seems like that job's kind of gone tits up, so let's see what's on it. So at that point, Aquaman turns to Vostok being like, hey, man, KGB's made it sound like you guys were friends. You know him? And he's like, faint memories, not really, don't remember. And he's like, okay, look, I know you're a clone, but you gotta kind of remember that. That's an important thing. He's like, I'm not a clone. I'm the real one. I'm out of here. You guys suck. And so he just flies away. And what's her name? Oh my God. Seriously, they never repeat this girl's name. Saeed? Is that it? It sounds right. Anyway. She's like, look, you pushed a bit too hard. You really shouldn't be going at him like that. And Aquaman's like, he's different from the original Vostok, and we need to know why. It's important here. And at that point, Operative's already broken his way into the USB drive, and it's just like, okay, they got control of Russian nukes. We're going to have a problem here. So Vostok flies off, and all of a sudden he gets a page, and he's like, I don't want to talk to you, Aquaman. And he's like, this isn't Aquaman. I know your backstory. If you want to know what's in your history, come to the moon. So Vostok flies up for that. We then see Operative says, okay, so yeah, they got nukes. And it's like, okay, well, hey, Saeed, in your, or Saye, that's her name, Saye. Do you see nukes in the future? Is that a thing? Do we have to be worried about them using the nukes? And she's like, I know, but like, I don't know. I have no idea. And she's like, well, some fortune teller you are. It's like, look, I may not have exact stuff, but I also don't know when it is either. It might be 5 minutes from now. It might be decades. I'm not sure. So Mara calls out being like, okay, you mentioned some great disaster with machines and stuff. Is it involved in that? And she's like, don't know. And I was like, all right, whatever. So Vostok gets up to the headquarters of Mayhem on the moon. And as he goes inside, NKV Demon's like, hey, Vostok, best buddy, what's up? And he's like, what? Who are you? And KGB comes up being like, hey, man, don't take it personally. He's not going to remember anything. It was a long time ago. And Vostok's like, I'm not sure I remember you either. And he's like, oh, no, but you and your brothers were my students. You trained under me. And he's like, brothers, what are you? And he's like, yeah, no, I work for Mayhem. We're here to restore Russia to its former glory, the former Soviet Union, where Soviets had control of space right up until the whole moon thing. But like, we can ignore that. America, it's stupid, it's dumb. You should be a part with us and doing our thing. And back on Earth, Operative is like, all right, look, if we want to stop them from using the nukes, I need to get to a Soviet installation. I happen to know where like 4 of them are. One of them is ideal for us because it's unmanned, and I can just use their computers to hack into it. And Yora's like, okay, I can teleport us there. And Prisoner of War's like, I want to come as backup. And she's like, why? He said it was unmanned. And he's like, I mean, sure, we can take backup, no big deal. So they all teleport over. And as they teleport in, they notice Vostok he's got a poster on the wall of this building. And Prisoner of War's like, he doesn't look like he's aged at all. What is that about? And they're just like, what? He's got a whole secret origin that we don't know anything about. Anyway, I'm going to hack into the computer. And as they're doing so, Prisoner of War smashes his gauntlets together and says, enough! You thought I turned back to the actual Prisoner of War, Dominic, but it was I, the ghost of Gary, the whole time, pulling a ruse on you. And he goes up to Operative, puts him in a chokehold, and says, you killed me. Now I am going to do the same to you. Look, all the rest of the stuff is whatever. Like, okay, fine. We're setting up the groups and the fact of like, oh, they have nukes and the main group knows it. The other group knows that they know. Vostok may be a double agent. Fine, whatever. It's okay. It's not great. It's whatever. But turning the page, and I thought it was going to be a thing of, oh, Gary regained control. Gary came back at this moment, or like slightly beforehand, which is why he wanted to go. No. He never lost control, and he literally introduces as fools. I love that. It's so corny and so over the top, but I love it so much. Yeah, no, I mean, everything else besides that, it's just an average issue. It doesn't feel like a whole lot really happens here. So I'm going to say this one is probably I got to go like 6.5. It just doesn't even feel like it's worth the 7. But like, I do really want to call out that moment of like, you fools, it was I, Gary. Like, that's such a good moment. Earth 2, number 29, written by Marguerite Bennett and Mike Johnson, art by Andy Smith. So, last issue, I don't even know, man. Like, the fact that World's End exists is throwing me all for a loop of, like, what actually happened. Here's what you need to know. In the last issue of World's End, issue number 8, I believe. Let me double check on that. Yes, issue number 8. Barbara Gordon got hit by a meteor. The moon exploded and Barbara Gordon got hit by a meteor. This issue is just exploring what happens there. So the moon exploded because Apocalypse hit it. It's meteors being cast all around the planet. And we see that in Chicago, Dick, Ted, and Barbara are just trying to outrun all the wreckage and chaos and destruction. Dick goes to find his son. He manages to find him and Barbara at the same point. The son manages to get to Dick, but ultimately Barbara seemingly gets smashed by a meteor. However, this issue reveals that she was not. She was simply caught in the impact and the explosion, but she's actually just under a little bit of wreckage. And we see that another woman comes up named Lottie, and she comes in, she's like, hey, I'll help you clear off the debris. So she's got a little bit of a concussion, but otherwise she's all right. And they're like, look, there's a train. It's coming to take refugees out of Chicago. And Lottie's like, oh, hey, I'll bring you back to it. So they all hop on her motorcycle and they drive out of the refugee camp. And as they drive out, they see there's a bunch of civilians who have all been driven desperate by the current situation. And so they start swarming around the motorcycle, and they're like, oh, please, I've got food, ammo, anything. They'll have water. Get their water. And we see one of them comes after Johnny, the kid, and is like, oh, please, I lost my own son. Let me hold your boy. And Lottie pulls out a hammer. And I guess it's worth noting at this point, she seems to very much be a Harley Quinn stand-in. She's got, like, the diamond pattern and, like, a two-tone top, so I don't know if this is pulling back from something, but regardless, she starts beating up people with the hammer, ends up stopping the person who's trying to kidnap Johnny, and Dick is like, all right, Johnny, it's okay, I got you, you're good. So they all hop back on the motorcycle, make their way through the crowd, and as they approach this place that Lottie is talking about, it turns out that it is a new, I don't know how you go, Mad Max-esque town called Gomorrah. And it's down on the piers, and Dick's like, I don't think you cleared this town with the authorities. And she's like, pshaw, we are the authorities here. And Barbara's like, are we supposed to feel safer here? What the hell's going on? And Dick's just like, I don't know, but there's no meteors, so that's something. And as soon as they enter in, they are immediately stopped by two twins. Dick gets punched out. He's out on the ground. And Lottie says, hey, no kids allowed, picks Johnny up, and tells the twins to send it back to the refugee camp. So Dick Grayson blacks out as Barbara is being taken away by one of the twins, and the other is being taking Johnny away. So at that point, Dick wakes up. He's being served food. He's handcuffed. And he's like, oh, I'm not hungry. And he's like, good, because you ain't eating it. You're serving it. So Dick's brought up on top of the pier where apparently this group has managed to capture a parademon. And they have this strange-ass religious cult thing going on. And basically, Dick says, like, yeah, I've been hearing about this. There are people who think that this is actually the apocalypse. So a lot of crazy doomsday cults have been spewing up. And with actual meteors falling from the sky, it's kind of hard to blame them. So we see this guy saying like, oh, great beast of Abaddon, we worship you, da-da-da, whatever. And they open up the cage with the parademon, or rather they are about to, as they lead Barbara up to basically be offered up as a sacrifice. And Dick's like, oh no, Barbara! But he's just held down, he just has to watch. And we see them say, okay, open up the cage. And as they open it up, the parademon just gets out and like seemingly flies away. Like, it just leaves. And Dick takes the opportunity to get out of the person who's holding him's grip. He punches Lottie in the face, and he's like, I've never felt this level of adrenaline before, but, like, God, I'm liking it. He grabs Lottie's hammer, smashes Barbara's handcuffs. The guy who was leading the whole processional as, like, the pastor or the priest or whatever gets his head ripped off by the parademon. And so Dick and Barbara just hop back onto Lottie's thing onto the motorcycle and say, okay, well, as much as I loved my husband getting all sexy and adrenaline filled, I really hope that we never do that again. And Dick says, all right, let's get back our son, and then we'll get to one of those refugee trains we were talking about. And he says everything's going to be all right, but he doesn't believe the words he's saying. All right, that's the issue. First and foremost, I need to express that you need to listen to the Earth 2 World's End issue 9, because it takes place immediately after this. It follows up on the storyline of this, and it makes possibly the strangest decision possible, but I won't spoil it yet. Undoing the death of Barbara Gordon. That was literally how they ended the scene in World's End. And they just said like, oh, but she didn't actually die. We had this whole fucking thing in the middle there. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Why would you do... I understand the bait and switch, but like I have given up on this book. I have given up on R2. Not R2 as a concept, but the book, because this is now absolutely nothing but we are only allowed to tell the main story in World's End, and this is nothing but filler, and we just have to make up situations in order to get there. Like, if you, plus, on top of that, if you were reading World's End, it doesn't make sense anymore because Barbara is now still alive in that book where you definitively saw her dead in it just the issue prior. Oh, God. It's so frustrating. I want this to go well, but it just feels so haphazardly thrown together. Yeah, I don't know. I can't give it much of anything. It's not like a horrible story independently. It's just what it represents. I think overall, I'm going to split the difference and just give this a 5. But just know that my frustration as soon as it was like, oh, wait, she's fine. Like, ugh. No, don't do that. Please. Green Arrow number 37, written by Andrew Kreisberg and Ben Sokolowski, art by Daniel Sampere. So last issue, Green Arrow went to go intercept Mia Dearden, and then a Dark Archer appeared and shot a guy. So we open up with a cop getting a phone call from someone representing the king, and they say, hey, the king has been very generous to you. He's paid for your daughter's chemo. Just let Green Arrow be part of this fight. Don't get involved. And cop's like, all right. So he walks over to his other cop saying like, oh, we're not to interfere. We're just going to let this play out. So the Dark Archer manages to kick, stab and knock over Green Arrow. He picks up Mia and is like, sorry, got my orders. And so takes off with her. And Green Arrow's like, all right, well, that didn't go well. So Felicity calls over the comms, just like, hey, you can still catch them. Do exactly what I say. Jump. And he jumps in the air. He lands on a car that's being driven by Diggle. And they manage to catch up and see that the Dark Archer and Mia are on top of a monorail. So Arrow uses a grappling arrow to get up to it. And Mia's just like, oh, I told you you'd come. And Dark Archer's like, yeah, that's kind of the point. So they start doing a fight out. They're colliding arrows, dodging each other's just barely, when all of a sudden Dark Archer fires off a smoke arrow, I guess, whatever. So he charges through the smoke with a knife, and as he's about to attack Green Arrow, he stops and he says, Oliver? And then Oliver has to duck very suddenly because of an oncoming bridge, and in doing so, when he looks back up, the Dark Archer is gone. Mia, meanwhile, is dangling off the edge of the monorail, and Green Arrow is like, all right, I've had to save your life twice so far, so I think I deserve some answers why. Cut to Katana, who apparently is trying to get answers out of a priest as to whose orders he's working under, and he's just like, oh, I devote my life to him. And it's like, I'm not here for God. And he's like, neither am I. I'm here for the king. So Katana slashes the guy and just being like, all right, I've been following this clan across the country. I'm getting closer to the king. Soon he will join you, my husband. The husband's in the sword, for anyone who didn't know. So we cut back to Mia, who's talking to Team Arrow, and says, John King, aka the king, is my dad, and he's a billionaire philanthropist. He does good things, and Oliver knows him as that much. But turns out that he actually has a darker side, and no one else knows about it. But she managed to find out about it because one night she came home when her mother discovered a secret about her father. And when she came home, when she saw her mother stabbed in the kitchen, she ran out the door and managed to get away before her father could do anything else. So it looks like that was years ago, but regardless, Felicity comforts her, and Oliver's just like, okay, but what's his secret? Like, yes, he kills people, but like, clearly this has to be bigger than that because no one would believe you otherwise. And she's like, oh, well, I stole this USB drive when I left, so it's password protected. And of course, Diggle's like, password, let me see that password. My God, it's like double encrypted. It will take weeks to... And then Felicity says, done. So they look at it and they say, oh boy, what is this? Well, it doesn't make me feel good. And it turns out it's a list of like 10,000 names called subjects. And some of them are big time people. Some of them are just janitors for like the Queen Foundation. It's like a whole thing. So Oliver gets on the phone with Zara, and she's like, hey, it only took you 10 hours to call me back after you stormed out of dinner. What's up? And he's like, look, I need you to do something. And she's like, as a girlfriend or as an employee? And he's like, employee. And Diggle's like, uh-oh, you're in hot water now. But to be fair to her, she takes all the information down. And it's like, yes, sir, what can I do for you, Mr. Queen? And he says, set up a meeting with me and John King. And she's like, oh, well, actually, you were invited to a fundraising party, so you should be able to get in that. And he's like, great, get me 2 extra invitations for that. And she's like, who will be joining us? And he's like, nah, you're not going, but I just need 2 extra invites. I promise I'll explain everything later. So turns out this fundraising party is on a blimp, and so they all are boarding the blimp, and I can't tell if Oliver's receiving or sending a text here. He says, on a blimp with a target, just FYI, you owe me, remember. Actually, I do know what that's about. We get to it later. So Oliver Queen hops on. He talks to John King, and immediately John's just like, hey, Green Arrow. Yeah, that's right. I know your secrets. Of course I do. I know everything about every city I seize control of. Do you know what power is? Power isn't about like literal superpowers or anything, which I know you don't have any. But real power is about being able to force people into your eternal debt. See, that's what I do. All the cities that I quote-unquote improve, I do it by curing my subjects of sickness, and in doing so, I get their pure devotion. They do anything for me. So that's how I make all these cities crime-free. And yeah, I'm doing this for Seattle now. And Oliver's just like, the city won't stand for this. And he's just like, they're not going to know. I'm not going to come out and just be like ruling over them in public. They're still going to have their sham elections, but like I'm the one who's really going to be in charge. And who knows, maybe after Seattle I'll go for Central City or Gotham or whatever. But you know what? All your mass vigilantes, I never understood you trying to save the city with mere gadgets. Let me show you the real way to do this stuff. And he presses a button and says, I just sent a mass text to all of my subjects to begin their assignments. You can't do anything to stop me now. And we see over at Sarah's apartment, that's where Mia's apparently hanging out. The TV's talking about how John King's the greatest ever. And Mia's just like, oh, God, I hate that guy. Don't worry. It's not a personal thing or whatever. And she's just like, yeah, no. How long have you known Oliver? And she's like, 12 hours. So thanks for letting me crash at your place. And he's just like, yeah, anyway, whatever. So doorbell rings. It's pizza there. Zara does this little thing where she's like, I wish that Oliver would show me a little bit of affection. And then at the door turns out to be two of John King's people there to attack Mia. So back on the blimp, a bunch of people have drawn their guns at Oliver, Felicity, and Diggle. And he's just like, yes, my subjects are everywhere. Felicity, I'm sure you feel bad about not joining my side. And she's like, nope, you didn't have good dental. So at that point, he's like, seriously, do you want to join my side now? Last chance. And Oliver tells him to go to hell. So he opens up the side of the blimp and pushes out Felicity, Oliver, and Diggle. And as Felicity's screaming to her death, all of a sudden she's like, oh, green lantern. And it turns out Oliver's text from earlier saying, hey, you owe me one, was meant for Hal Jordan Green Lantern, saying, hey, I had a feeling we'd be thrown off this blimp eventually, so I called in a favor. And then Hal's like, yep, but now you owe me one. Next issue, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Hard Traveling Heroes. I'm sure it won't be tied into the TV show at all. Here's the thing. I'm not that upset about the TV show stuff this issue, but that Felicity moment of, yeah, I just cracked the password that should take weeks to crack because I'm just that good. You could easily just say it wasn't that well protected. Like, you didn't have to make it this whole big thing of like, oh man, it's going to take weeks to done. God. So yeah, it's annoying, but at least to some extent, I do like the idea of the story here. We got a king and a queen. We got Oliver who's trying to do things by cleaning up the city from the bottom up, whereas King is doing it from the top down. I like the dichotomy there. I think it's going to be an interesting turnabout. I'm just so fed up with the TV stuff. So yeah, that's it's probably going to be I'll give it a 6.5. It would be a 7 if it weren't for Felicity. Justice League 3000, number 12, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Howard Porter. So last issue had a little stinger on the end where the cryogenic pods of Blue Beetle and Booster Gold were found on Takron Galtos. And this issue's just about them. So we open up with Ted waking up in bed, and he's like, man, I had the weirdest dream that we were cryogenically frozen for 1,000 years. And as he goes to use the bathroom, Booster's there like, hey, buddy, we need to talk. And he's like, not yet, I gotta pee. And he's like, no, now, we gotta talk now. And he's like, oh, it can wait. And as he opens up what he thinks is the bathroom, it's a hallway leading out into a bunch of alien species. And Ted turns to Booster and just like, it wasn't a dream, was it? And he's like, oh, if only. So they get their costumes on. They go and talk to the sheriff, which, of course, at this point is taken over by Convert, but they don't know anything about that. And it's just like, yeah, this is a prison planet. Not all of the future looks this bad, but yeah, not much of it is better either. And Ted's just like, man, we really screwed the pooch this time around, didn't we? And they talk to the sheriff briefly and just like, hey, so you said that you found us buried? And it's just like, yeah, it was like some really old-looking cryogenic pods, like super outdated. We were surprised you survived. And Booster and Blue Beetle try to remember, like, how did it happen? Blue Beetle remembers something about a birthday party for Ralph and Max, but he doesn't remember anything else. And Booster's like, maybe I was too drunk. And Blue Beetle's like, but you don't drink. And he's like, yeah, that's the weird part. So at that point, Sheriff chimes in and he's like, wait a minute, hold on. You guys say you're from the 21st century. Do you like remember your time like super well? And I'm just like, yeah, totally. I mean, except for the part of us disappearing. Yeah. And he's like, interesting. So They ask whether or not they have any records surviving on them, and just like, I mean, not really. We have some basic records called like the Super Buddies, and he's like, no, that's someone else. Look, we were part of JLI, and he's like, JLI, yeah, Justice League International. And he's like, Justice League, very interesting. So at that point, Booster's like, look, we need a little bit of time to digest all this, and Sheriff's like, yeah, no problem. Feel free to. I wouldn't suggest walking around that much. Please don't stray too far from the compound. And Booster immediately is just like, okay, we got to get out of here, man. Let's try to bounce. So Booster's like, where? We are in the future on like it's completely alien, pretty much planet. Like there's no way for us to be able to get out of here. We just traveled 1,000 years, and I know time travel is normal for you, but I need some time to adjust. So at that point, Blue Beetle and Booster suggest getting breakfast, and he's like, oh, but I've been asleep for 10 centuries and my hypoglycemia is acting up. And he's like, fine, whatever, we'll get you bacon and eggs. So we then see that Convert goes and talks to Evil Terry, Boy Terry, and is like, yeah, we found them. They're just wandering around. I got a good eye on them now. I think they could be some use. And Boy Terry's just like, why not just kill them? Like, if they're going to be heroes, like, kill them before they come up with a problem. He's like, no, I got it. Plus, they said that they were part of a Justice League back in their time. They would have some sort of knowledge, and we'd be able to pump them for a way to defeat the Justice League that's a problem for us. And Boy Terry's like, all right, fine. You have 1 week to study them, and then bring them to Cadmus World, and I'll interrogate them. So, we see Booster and Blue Beetle are looking over and they're like, boy, Times Square is still pretty much exactly the same as it was before, but like everything else is totally different. And he questions why Booster doesn't know about any of this stuff, considering he's a time traveler from later in the timeline. He's like, well, maybe I was just absent the day we covered the 31st century, whatever. Turns out that Booster tries activating Skeets, but Skeets is no longer there. He's been deactivated or something. And they make a joke about how he's stored under Booster's porn collection, but regardless, as they're walking through the town, we see that there is a very overweight man wearing Blue Beetle's costume talking to Convert in a different body, and says, hey, take a look at those two. And the other Blue Beetle's like, wait a minute, that guy's in my suit. Why is he wearing my suit? And it's like, well, actually, you're wearing his suit. Remember you found it when your father was excavating and he got equipment from the place? And he's like, yeah, he found some base in the downtown ruins. Like, what the heck? I'm the one who's taken all this. And he basically says how he's become a hero of his time, taking people who are already in prison that are trying to escape the prison and putting them back into the prison. And no one was ever going to escape, but like he just does it anyway. So he's like, Convert says, look, I know you want to be helpful here, but I need you to not interfere with those two. Leave those two alone. And Blue Beetle, overweight one, is like, yeah, well, if they don't break the rules, then they'll be fine. But I don't like the guy wearing my costume. So at that point, Blue Beetle says, hey, I came up with an escape plan. I had a New York office that had a Beetle base miles beneath the ground underneath it. It should still be here. It was a bunker. It was designed to withstand a lot. It might still have some of my tech in there. And Booster's like, it's been 1,000 years, dude. I appreciate you think you can build things well, but it's 1,000 years. And he's like, well, it can't hurt to check it out, right? Then we stop the entire plot. We go over to the actual Justice League, and they basically say, hey, we got a castle on the Camelot 9 planet. Isn't it crazy we have that now? Also, we've decided on the name Justice League, and Wonder Woman is out slaughtering demons for King Arthur's army, and she's never looked any more disturbing than that. So, that happened. We then see Booster and Blue Beetle making their way down an extremely deep hole that they think the base will be there at the end, and he's just like, yeah, well, I might still have a spare bug down there. And Booster's just like, wait a minute, hold on, spare? You made more than one of those things? And he's like, yeah, of course. It's good to have backups. And Booster's like, well, didn't that cost a fortune? He's like, but you forget, I was once a wealthy man, unlike you who married into it. And Booster's like, I loved my wife for her money. Fair enough. So at that point, the overweight Blue Beetle's like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And as they are about to waltz into the Beetle Cave, Blue Beetle stops him, Booster stops him and just like, hey man, hold up. This place has been booby trapped. It's all wired. I think I can take it out, though. And he reprograms a few things, and he's like, got it. We're good. Also, I just noticed that my Legion flight ring has also been taken from me. So I'm literally just a dude now. So at that point, they go into the cave. They do see that there is another bug down there. And he's like, oh, well, someone's been patching it up. It looks a lot more futuristic than when I left it, but ultimately it's still pretty much the same as when I did. It looks great in here. I even have my autographed picture of Superman here, laminated and everything. So at that point, they realize that there is someone here that has been using it, and Blue Beetle calls him out saying like, oh, well, that guy owes me a bunch of royalties. When then the overweight one comes out saying, oh, there's only room for one Blue Beetle in this town. And he comes out with giant mechanical legs, and he starts attacking Booster and Blue Beetle. And he's like, how the hell did you manage to squeeze into my costume? And Booster's like, well, I remember there was a period where you were kind of overweight. So they start fighting. They do what they can. Booster realizes he also doesn't have his force field. So he's like, look, this guy has future tech. He has stuff we could not even possibly imagine. We just got to bail. We just got to run away. He is not worth trying to fight him. And Blue Beetle's like, but it's my stuff. I want my stuff. So at this point, they make their way to the sewers, and Booster hears a bunch of rats, and he's like, okay, this is a problem, because here in the future, there's a lot more toxicity, which means a lot more radiation, which means a lot more mutations, which means these rats are not going to be normal rats. And we see them crawl out, and they are like massive and purple and disgusting. And it's like, all right, so yeah, let's just start running away from them. But as they turn around to run the other way, in comes the Blue Beetle again, this time piloting the ship. And Blue Beetle says, screwed the pooch again, didn't we, buddy? Look, I get it, Keith Giffen. I understand. I get it. I absolutely understand why you'd want to tell this story. It seems perfectly tailor-fit. I already had trouble connecting to the Justice League. Now you're bringing back actual heroes from, like, continuity that is already pre-established, but you still make it very difficult for me to connect to them, because it's just nothing going into it. It's just two guys talking for a lot of the issue. I had some serious books this week I had to cover. This took me the longest because they just didn't shut up. Everything was multiple paragraphs. So a long read. I was already like in and out of it because it's a new story arc with new characters that I'm like struggling to connect to. Maybe it's great for the blue and gold fans out there. I am not one of those. I don't think they're bad, but I'm just not a fan. So collectively, this didn't do much for me. 6. I can't say doing anything wrong, per se, and I do see the appeal of it. 6. Sure, whatever. Lobo number 3, written by Cullen Bunn, art by Riley Brown and Allison Borges. So last issue, Lobo is forced to have a team of humans to some extent, or at least they're helping him out enough, so he keeps him around. This issue picks up with Zarnia. Years ago, we see the continuation of the flashback we had before. The Emperor is going on some holy rite or something like that, where he is communing with the lifeblood essence of Zarnia and exchanging his fluids with it. And he's like, oh, we shall taste each other upon each other's tongues and whatnot. And the soldiers are like laughing at how stupid it sounds, but Lobo comes up just saying, hey, show some respect. This is a holy place, and these are holy rites. And as the Emperor is going to give his blood in sacrament to the place or whatever, all of a sudden, a bunch of, I don't want to call them anarchists, but revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them, comes in and says, attack. He's a devil god. Kill him before the curse consumes us all. And they start attacking the Emperor. And we see that one of them just straight up shoots the Emperor through the skull. And Lobo goes up and he's like, oh, are you okay? Are you good? And of course, there's Zarnians. He starts recovering and he's like, oh, send your friends, send your imps, but no one can kill me any more than they could murder a world. So Lobo and the rest of the soldiers jump into the fray, start attacking the revolutionaries as the head continues the Holy Sacrament. And the revolutionaries are like, dude, he's evil. He's diseased. He is awful. He is cursed. You cannot keep on letting him do this. And Lobo's just slashing through all of them, stabbing them. And just like, oh, still you defend him, why? And Lobo's like, oh, I'm sworn to protect the Emperor and all of Zarnia, and I don't believe in curses. So we see that the Emperor completes drinking the lifeblood of Zarnia and also adding his own blood to the mix, and he's like, oh, it is quite a holy day. So we cut back to now, and we are in the middle of a battle with the next of the people who's trying to destroy the Earth, and we see that Rave and Luna are fighting off a bunch of henchmen while Emily's trying to hack into the computer. But of course, it's written in alien code, so she's just doing her best here. Meanwhile, Lobo's pissed off because he's like, I had this guy and he managed to slip away. I had my hand right on him. And Emily says, oh yeah, his name is 00. That's his thing. He's able to phase. He's able to phase things. And that's why your hand is currently wedged inside of a wall at like an atomic level. So don't touch him. And Lobo's like, yeah, thanks for the help. Anyway, find out where he is here, and that way I can get him. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll do our best, but like, you're also kind of part of a wall. What are you going to do about that? And he's like, leave that to me. So he cuts off his own arm, and he's like, yeah, it'll regrow, it'll be fine. But what he really hurt here is my honor, my self-respect, and that does not grow back so easily. So Emily finally manages to get into the system. Luna's like, how the hell did you manage it? Like, seriously, are you like a super genius? And she's like, just good at it, you know, whatever. Like you are, like dressing it like a whore. So at that point, they say, yeah, he's almost a ghost. He's flickering from one place to the next in a blink of an eye. That's why we're having so much trouble getting him. And his whole plan is he's going to teleport his ship into the middle of Earth's core and then phase the entire Earth, causing mass chaos and pandemonium. So, yeah, that's the thing. Meanwhile, Lobo is already stuck in a fight with him. Just like, I found him. And so he's getting punched over and over. Every time Lobo goes for a slash, the dude just phases out of it. And Lobo's like, I'm going to give you one chance to surrender here. And he's like, bro, I'm winning. And he just keeps on throwing punches, knocking him into walls. Every time Lobo attacks, phasing through it. And he's taunting Lobo too. He's like, oh, I've heard about you. Lobo, meanest killer in the universe. And what, now you're trying to kill off the competition? He's like, nah, I've been hired to defend Earth from all of you guys who were hired to kill it. And he was just like, okay, but like, what does it say that whoever hired us, all 8 of us who were hired to kill the Earth, didn't think you were worth it? Like, you aren't capable of killing a planet like we are. You're not even in the top 8. You're pathetic, man. So at that point, Lobo says once again, like, I swear to God, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, yeah, tell me how that's going to work out. So he keeps on getting beat. Lobo gets on the comms and talks to Emily, just like, Emily, seriously, I could use some help here. And Emily's like, I think I figured it out. I could stop him from phasing. And then hearing that, the 00 phases out and reappears right in the room where Emily and them are. And of course, against the humans, it's super easy. There's nothing they can do to fight against. He just bashes them down. And as he's about to go for Emily, he's just basically saying, like, you humans are so pathetic, all of you. And like, Lobo's working with a prepubescent one. That's even more pathetic. And Emily clicks a button and says, well, you just shut up. And in clicking the button, it forces him into a state of Schrodinger, basically. He is both there and not there simultaneously. And Lobo comes in just being like, so is he good? Is he done? Does he hurt right now? And Emily's like, yes, and absolutely. So Lobo comes in and he's like, well, guess I just need to end this. And he starts like tapping up and down his chest and finds a solid point, a place that's staying intact. And he just slowly pushes the knife inside. And he's like, here's one thing I need you to understand. Between you and me, only one of us has killed a world before. So that's now 4 targets down, 4 targets left. They blow up the ship and hop back on their way out, but they realize the remaining 4 are not leaving a solid trail. They're a bit harder to find. So Lobo puts it to Emily, like, hey, find these guys, make yourself useful. And he's like, all right, keep your skinny jeans on. I'm doing my best. So they point out the next one named Snake Omega. He's wanted on a dozen worlds. He's got all this crazy stuff. But the main thing that he does is very high-tech weapons and ammo. It's like bleeding edge. He's always on the top tier of it. And there's recently been a new string of murders that leaves No gunpowder, no accelerant. It's fast, it's lethal. Either he's the one who's doing this or he's going to come looking into this. So that should be where their next target is. And Rave points out, okay, sounds good, but the problem is that this ammo, this new stuff, it's taking place in Metropolis. And Metropolis is where Superman hangs out. And Lobo's like, Superman? I'm only familiar with Supergirl. So, yeah. It's good. It's all right. Here's the thing. I like the concept of the villain. I like the way they write him out. I think that Lobo himself is kind of like whatever to this story. The villain is honestly much more interesting, and the way that he's dealt with, I like, the plot more than I like the characters, if that makes sense. Beyond that, it's fine. It's okay. This book, I would say, is getting less frustrating, maybe. It's hard to say at this point. Obviously, next issue is Lobo v Superman, or at least they become aware of each other, so we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, I'd say this one is probably I kind of want to say 7. And that, honestly, it feels a little high, but I'm going to stick with it because the 6.5 feels too low. So yeah, 7 for this. Hopefully, it can continue to improve over time. Swamp Thing number 37, written by Charles Soule, art by Jesus Saiz. So last issue, we ended with the Calculus deciding that their avatar would be Lady Weeds. And then this immediately opens up with him saying like, all right, so do you not want me to tell you anything about being the avatar of the machines? Nothing at all? Like, we gonna do it to it? And Lady Weeds is like, no, I'm in. Tell me, just do it. So we see Calculus A is immediately like thrusting his hands into her abdomen and just like bleeding everywhere. And he's like, oh, sorry, you might feel a little pinch. And she's like, nah, I don't feel anything at all. Rip me in half if you have to. And he's like, oh, well, we're not quite done yet. And we see his face open up, tubes extend and implant themselves into her eyes. She screams out as electricity starts blasting through her, but then emerging out the back of Calculus A comes the new body of Lady Weeds. And they disconnect the quote-unquote umbilical cord, and she manages to wake up, and he's like, are you? And she's like, yes. Oh, yes, I am free. And she just straight up murders her own body even more, and then just blasts out the roof of the building. And we see that she takes over a bunch of tablets and like screens and everything around her, and they all just say yes over and over again. Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, in a snowy apple field, Swamp Thing emerges very quickly, exploding out of the ground, impaling with a bunch of spikes all of the apples and cutting them in half. And as he lands, in comes a clapping John Constantine that says, oh, fancy a tart? And Swamp Thing's like, okay, but like, seriously, why are you here, man? And he's like, oh, well, what is this about? You're going to become a greengrocer? And he's like, no, I'm training. I'm doing this simultaneously in like 55 places around the world. What do you want, Constantine? And he's like, oh, well, I tend to be where I need to be, and as for what I want, I just wanted to pass along some knowledge. There's a new metal kingdom. And Swamp Thing's like, I know, that's why I'm training. And he's like, yeah, I figured as much. But here's the thing, it's different. They just brought up an avatar of their own. And we cut over to the Arctic Circle at the service, and we see Lady Weeds is like, okay, so you call yourselves the Calculus, right? I'm here to pick my new name. Lady Weeds doesn't fit. You call yourself Calculus. And it's like, yes, I am A Calculus. That's B and C Calculus. And Omega Calculus there hiding in the back. And it's just like, all right, well, that name's wrong. I don't like it. You guys are metal. There's a flow to it. The pulse, all the algorithms. Rhythm. I like that. Okay, from now on, you're no longer the Calculus. We are the rhythm. That is our thing. The green, the red, the rhythm. That fits in there. And me, I will be the Machine Queen. And the Omega Calculus is like, our name is irrelevant. We have given you power. Just tell us how to take dominion over all of the other kingdoms. And she's just like, whoa, okay, hold on. I touched your memories and I know why you failed. You want to take over the other kingdoms because you see them as inefficient, but it's not enough. You need to have resolve. You need to be willing to burn the world down if it's not what you get. So I promise you I will never be powerless again, and I will get you your kingdom within the first day. So Constantine tells Swamp Thing, like, yeah, you green ones, the people in the green, you're so focused on plants, you're so narrow-minded, you don't understand what's happening around you in, like, the larger world. Me, I'm a big picture guy. I saw the machines happening, and I want you to know that your training regimen, this thing you're doing, you're going to want to kick it up like 20 notches. It's nowhere near enough. And Swamp Thing's like, you know, I saved you in my own book here, the whiskey thing. Do you remember that? Are you going to help me? And Constantine's like, I just did. This is me helping you. And ultimately, like, you guys are essentially gods. Anything I could do would pale in comparison to that. So I'm just going to go jump in a hole and hide in that until this is all blown over. So we cut over to the Temple of the Serene in India, where the Avatar of the Gray, if you remember, she was an Avatar who did not want to be an Avatar. She's looking for a way out of her current position. And in crashes the Machine Queen. And she's just like, you should better not have broken any of my scrolls. And she's like, oh, shut up. Look, I am the Machine Queen of the Rhythm. I know you are the Mistress of the Gray. And you hate Alec Holland. And she's just like, go on. So Machine Queen continues, look, you hate yourself in the gray. You're trying to find a way out. These scrolls are useless to you. And she starts burning them. And she's like, no, stop that. And he's like, no, seriously, there's only one person who knows how to get you out of that body. And she's like, yeah, Gorov of the Serene. He was mine. I had him before. I was like, right. But now he's with Alec Holland. So here's the thing. I can return him to you. All I ask is that you stay with me. I want the gray to help me out. Give me the strength of the gray. And he's like, oh, but how? How would you possibly deal with Alec Holland? She's like, I was stuck in a hospital bed, and all I had to do was time to think. I came up with a plan, and I searched it over and over for flaws again and again and again and again. I know how to take him out. I'm putting it into action. And as a token of solidarity, I'm going to help you out now. And she uses the machines to take over the body of the gray and replace it with a new, much more nice-looking, feminine, mechanical body. And the gray is immediately indentured to the Rhythm. So he's like, yep, all right, the gray is ours. And just like that, we double our strength. And the calculus is like, all right, fair enough. We are all in. We will trust whatever you need to say. So they're like, all right, so what's our next objective? It's like, well, we have the beginnings of an army. We need someone to command it. And Omega Calculus is like, I'll do it. It is my position. I will take down all that. Your job is to take down in single combat their avatar. And Machine Queen's like, you don't quite have the passion we need for a commander. I have an idea. And so she tells the calculus to keep a lookout on all the video feeds around the world because they're looking for someone specific. Cut to Philadelphia. A very gross-looking man is eating an alley cat. Machine Queen lands, introduces herself, and says, "You're Anton Arcane. You have committed massive murder. You have killed multiple of my predecessors of the Green, and I should kill you just on, like, moral principles alone." And Anton's just like, no, please, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to. And she's like, yes, you did. Don't act like you didn't. Don't own up to that stuff. You're nothing but a wretch. I want you to be a general in my army and take out Alec Holland, but you are pathetic. You're sitting here eating an alley cat. I should kill you just because of that. And he's like, wait, no, you have to listen to me. If you said Alec Holland, I have something incredible you're going to want to see. And she's like, fine, show me. He's like, look, when that other guy took over the Green momentarily, I snuck in. I snuck into the bayou, and I took something that I knew would be very useful to me someday. And he opens up a sack, and inside are the bones of Alec Holland. Whoa! All right, so first off, Machine Queen, top tier. Love the plan. Love all this stuff. The scene of her birth, horrific and yet amazing at the same time. I love the rhythm concept. I love how it's managing to take over the technology and using this whole thing to their advantage. Add on the fact that they had already set up the fact in last issue that Anton Arcane was alive again. And they immediately pay it off with this incredible thing of the bones of the original Alec Holland. Because obviously he was killed to become Swamp Thing, but it was more of a spiritual thing than just the bones are wrapped around with leaves. Like, this is going to have repercussions, and I love every second of it. Writing is still top tier. I love this book so much. This particular issue, 8.5. It's just shy of the 9 for me, but I cannot overstate how much this book is just killing it week to week. I absolutely love it. So check it out. Batman Eternal number 35, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fox, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Fernando Blanco. So, this issue picks up 3 hours from now, where we have Bruce Wayne in the Batmobile, seemingly out of control, flying out the side of Wayne Tower with someone saying, I want you to understand that this is personal. The whole world is breaking around you, and now you're going to break with it. So then we cut to now, aka 3 hours previous, and it's been 2 weeks since Hush fell. Obviously, the end of that last issue was Wayne Enterprises was being seized by the government, and we have Bruce having a lunch with Lucius where he basically says, yeah, man, you broke. You didn't diversify your portfolio. You had all your stuff tied up in your company. The company's now been taken, so you are like super broke. Also, your manor's been taken. You already know that because it's been turned into Arkham Manor. And yeah, it's a whole problem. And Bruce is like, I don't care about any of that. I just need to know the R&D branch, what happened to the Batman Incorporated stuff. And he's like, Commissioner raided the facilities yesterday. They have everything. And Lucius gets up to go pay the coffee bill. Bruce gets a call from Julia, and Julia's like, hey, man, the inmates upstairs are driving the bats crazy, and therefore I'm being driven crazy by the bats. Also, you're keeping Hush down in the bat cave inside like a cell, and he just keeps trying to talk to me, and I hate it. I hate every second of this. And like they're talking about Alfred and like whether or not he's doing well or not. And Hush is like, oh dear, did somebody hurt Alfred? And Julia pulls a gun on Hush, just being like, give me a reason, man. I swear to God, I'll do it. And Bruce is like, don't. I'll be back soon. Let's just chill. So Lucius comes back and is just like, hey, Lucius, I gotta run. I gotta go. And Lucius is like, okay, but there's something else that you should tell Batman. The commissioner took everything, including me. So we then see Bard is on top of the GCPD. He's talking to Vicky Vale on the phone. Apparently she skipped town recently to go follow a story. Vicky's calling him out by saying like, hey, your voice is shaky. There's clearly something you're not telling me. What's up? And he's like, look, I want to tell you. I really do. There's stuff that's bigger than like what's going on, but I can't share it yet, not until it's done. And she's like, all right, fine. I got stuff I got to do too. And we see that she arrived in Detroit, a.k.a. the place that Jason Bard transferred from. So as she hangs up, her photographer Joey is nearby as well, and he tries making a little quip, and she's just like, shut up, I don't want to hear it. Look, let's go out on the town. We got to go to a couple of old cop bars and see if we can find somebody to share their secret stories of Commissioner Jason Bard. Meanwhile, back at GCPD, everyone's getting set up on the roof. We see that they got a whole computer set up here, as well as Lucius Fox up top. And he says, all right, have the site's been cleared out? And Maggie Sawyer's there saying, yeah, but the blast radius. And he's like, don't care, do it. And so they detonate a huge amount of construction stuff around the building. And he's like, all right, now for the fun part. Lucius, can you tell me when Batman gets into town? He's just like, yes, well, it doesn't seem like he's... Oh, wait, never mind, there he is. So Batman's coming into town in the Batmobile. Julia's on the comm saying, like, you know this is a trap. What are you doing? And he's like, sometimes you got to force a confrontation, and it's best to jump in when the other person thinks they hold all the cards. And Julia's like, yeah, but, like, what if he actually holds all the cards here? Plus, why is he still doing this if we captured Hush? Clearly, he has something else going on. And then all of a sudden, the comms cut out. Jason Bard hops on, and he's like, Batman, you're under arrest. We have hacked your bat computer. Pull over. So, back in Detroit, we see Vicky is talking to a bartender who was a former cop. His name was Frank. And he's like, hey, Warren from Gotham says hi. And he's like, oh, hey, well, I suppose you're here to talk about the kid, right? And he's like, yeah, Jason Bard. And he's like, yeah, it was really rough seeing what happened to him. He was such a nice kid. And she's like, well, what happened to him? And it's like, oh, well, it was a cape. Detroit's own Batman is what caused all his problems. So back in Gotham, Bard's basically just taunting Batman, just saying like, come on, man, you know you already lost. You can't do anything here. I've hacked into all your stuff, and Lucius is walking me through everything. Batman tries to shut off the comms, and he's like, no, you don't get to do that. Like, Lucius has locked everything. We're going to keep having this conversation. And he says, by the way, the shell of your car is really like high protected. It's this nanofiber car. It's what's making it so that we can't get to the internal operation commands. But in the R&D department of Wayne Enterprises, we discovered this net that was made of ultra-heated mesh wire, and it can melt through anything. And that's like, you didn't even manage to put it in the Bat car, in the Batmobile, because it would melt through that. So we've set it up. And immediately, Batman just rolls right through it. He's hit by it. The shell of the Batmobile has to be chipped off in order to defend the rest. And so now the core of the system is open, and Lucius starts getting in, and he starts getting a GPS path, sending him right to their location. And Jason's like, last chance, man. You want to turn yourself in or not? Like, the only thing we've let you control now is the emergency brake. And he's like, screw you. So he's like, all right, fair enough. So they fire up the jet propulsion system, and Lucius is like, but that could kill him. And even Bullock at this point is like, no, seriously, what is wrong with you? There are people out on those streets. And Lucius is like, this is for them. Do it. And he hits the button. Jets go off. Batman goes careening off of a highway into a building. He calls up Julia, who managed to get back onto the comm somehow. Just like, hey, I'm out for a moment. What do you need me to do? And he's just like, I can't see anything. I don't know the trajectory, but I know, like, this area of town, like, I'm heading into Wayne Enterprises. And it's like, yeah, like, I'll try to do something to stop it, but I don't know what I can do. So he launches out of the first building, crashes into Wayne Enterprises. Jason Bard tells him, like, hey, this is your last building. This is your last chance to surrender. And Batman says, look, Bard, you don't have to do this. Hush cannot get to you anymore. You don't have to do any of this. And Bard looks at a cop's badge that doesn't belong to him, belongs to a woman, and says, you don't know what I need. And we see him crash into Wayne Tower, go through a few floors. Hush just starts laughing as he sees Julia trying to do anything but is unable to do it. And then Batman comes out the other side, and he's many, many hundreds of feet in the air as the Batmobile starts jet propulsing down to the ground. And we see the repeating of the first line. This was personal. The world breaks around you and you have to break with it. But then we cut back to the cop one last time as he's talking to Vicky, saying, the thing you need to understand about Jason Bard is that he lost everything that night because someone like your Batman took everything away from him. And if you could see the look on his face, you'd know that he became the man prepared to burn down the world to make things right. So, character development. We got rid of Hush last issue, and I questioned, okay, how are we going to turn this? What's going to be the big thing? And it turns out it might be Jason Bard. He seems like he's got a lot going on there. Obviously, he was under control of Hush, or was he? It's a lot going on. I'm super into it. I think this one is probably going to be I'm going to say 7.5. I think it's missing just a little bit to getting to that 8, but it's very close. So I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to the rest, and solid issue. Future's End number 31, written by Azzarello Lemire, Jurgens and Giffen, art by Jesus Marino. So last issue was kind of the end of a section. It was the end of the trade at the very least. And this one definitely feels like a reorganization. So we open up with Lois Lane giving a press conference saying, hey, I went to the Cadmus Island. I saw all this stuff. I took videos. I published my story. There is a raid on the island by a vigilante group known as the Outsiders. I have heroes that were held prisoner from Earth 2. I have one of the biggest national cover-ups in history. It's a whole big thing. More importantly, she does specifically say that Green Arrow, aka Oliver Queen, was not a part of this. She leaves that out conveniently, which we'll get to. But she does say, Brother Eye, he sees control. But right now, this war is not over yet. It's still ongoing, and it won't be stopped until we take down Cadmus as an organization overall. So we then go to Green Arrow Island, where a helicopter is landing, where Oliver Queen is, and out comes Buddy Baker and family, aka Animal Man. And apparently Animal Man was in on this whole thing from the very beginning. And we see Maxine is like, oh, hey, I'm here for a vacation. I love it here, Uncle Ollie. And he's like, yeah, so do I. So he's got a whole little cabana built up, and he's like, yeah, do you see Lois's story? And he's like, yeah, totally. It took my guys forever to wipe me out of the footage she wanted to use, but I'm determined to stay dead. Like, I'm retired. I'm out of this. And Emiko does much better at being a Green Arrow than me anyway. So, and for your part, you did great at my eulogy. Like, that was top tier. And he's like, well, I was an award-winning actor. So they just lay down with some Mai Tais on the beach and chill out. We then cut to Siberia, and this is where Constantine and Superman are currently at. And Superman's like, hey, man, why did you bring me here? And he says, oh, well, this is where the Tunguska explosion was, the meteorite. And he's like, yeah, a meteorite. Or maybe a spaceship from a doomed planet for their only hope. And Superman's like, don't mess with me, man. And he's like, all right, look, sorry. But then all of a sudden, Midge, a.k.a. Constantine's, I don't know, lover, whatever she is, comes out and is just like half dressed, and she's speaking in riddles. She spits in Constantine's face, then says, oh, save me, Superman, slaps Superman, and then is ready to start fighting him, when all of a sudden there's a massive explosion behind them. She says, he's here, and then she's desperate to go into the explosion to see what it is. Turns out, the best I can describe it is a ghost bear, but it has Brainiac's symbol on its forehead, and it has like a skeleton visible inside of it. So Superman's like, all right, get her out of here. I'll take care of this. And he's like, where am I supposed to? Constantine's like, where am I supposed to go? And he's like, whatever, just do it. So at that point, the bear starts talking and says, Krypton, last of your race, welcome to the harvesting. As in the pact, by coming here, your coming place has been spared. And Superman's like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, oh, your father is admired by my father. You are special. The heart of the master heats and burns. And then we see the bear once again, like, superheats, explodes again, this time seemingly permanently. Constantine manages to barely escape the explosion, only to get picked up by Superman, along with Midge. And he's like, what do I have to do to stop this thing? And Constantine says, unfortunately, you got to go home. We then go to Cadmus Island, where King Faraday has a whole little paramilitary troop that's looking over some stuff. We see him, or maybe it's not even his stuff now that I'm thinking about it. It might just be the normal army. But regardless, he teleports into the location of the underground Cadmus base. He sees a few hallways are still up and running, and he makes his way to the DNA storage area, which apparently he was really hopeful to find something in. But as he gets there, he sees that the entirety of the facility there has collapsed into the sea, and everything is gone. So the last bit we get is in Pittsburgh, where we meet up with, I think it was Madison Payne? I don't know. So the new Firestorm being read with Jason. And we see her basically say, like, I am so beyond confused. What even happened? And he's like, oh, well, the explosion must have fused part of Ronnie and, like, redid and reorganized stuff. Point being is that you're now the body of Firestorm, whereas I'm the co-pilot in the brain. And she's like, okay, but I don't want this. Can we just split? You guys could split. Why can't we split? And she's like, well, you should be able to. You just got to focus on it. And she's like, I'm working, but it ain't doing it. So I can't live like this. You got to fix this. And he's like, I don't know what else I can do here. Like, I'm doing the same things that we did with Ronnie, but, like, nothing's happening. So I don't know. And she's like, I can't live with you in my head, man. It's too weird. And he's like, you think I like it any better? Like, every time you think about the stuff you did with your boyfriend, I can see it. Please stop thinking about that stuff. So she zooms around, and we see that Ronnie is, of course, having his funeral. The father of Jason Rush steps up and says, hey, he was a friend of my son for so long. I became friends with his mother. Like, he was a troubled kid growing up because his dad died, but ultimately he started turning his life around, and if it wasn't for the damned war of Earth 2, like, things might have ended up differently for him, but losing his mother really sent him into a tailspin. So I don't know why he was at that lab. Clearly he knew something was going on. He went there to stop it, and I think we owe him more than we could possibly imagine. So we see that somehow, not being noticed, this flaming woman is in a tree just watching the funeral happen, and she's all sad that Ronnie died, and Jason's like, oh, he lost his life trying to save you, Madison. That's the kind of man he was. And she's like, yeah, I realize that, and it's given me something that I have to live up to, but, like, I think our next step needs to be going to visit Dr. Yamazaki, because maybe he'll have some idea as to how to fix this. So where do we go from here? And Jason's like, okay, yeah, the Yamazaki thing maybe, but I think you need to go talk to Cal, your boyfriend. Like, he still thinks you're dead. That's kind of an issue, and the only reason you haven't had a funeral yet is because they couldn't find your body. And she's like, no, I can't do that, not while I'm still like this. Like, what am I supposed to do? Say, like, oh, yeah, hey, please ignore the flames and the fact that there's another man living in my head. And she's like, all right, yeah, true enough, fine. So she storms off saying, besides, before all this happened, we had issues. So as she flies away, we see Tim Drake, aka Cal, is looking at the necklace in his hand, and he's very, very sad. It's fine, I guess. Here's the thing. The Faraday stuff, I can mildly understand, like, those pages. It's just him trying to find something that he's looking for. Firestorm pages, also fine. My biggest problem is the Superman pages. I don't understand a goddamn thing that's happening in that plot. Okay, Superman needs to go back to Metropolis in order to face Brainiac, but Brainiac's in Siberia and also in the middle of Africa, and somehow it's transferring between these places. I don't know what this plot is. I have no idea what's going on there. Yeah, I mean, overall, I probably would still give this issue like a 6.5, I think, but it probably could have gotten a 7 if those pages were just slightly better understood, just slightly better written. Beyond that, it's just kind of a reorganization issue, getting everyone refocused on what their new objective is now that Cadmus Island has been taken out. So, yeah, I'm going to give this one 6.5, and we'll see what happens next time. Earth 2 World's Finest number 9, written by Bennett, Johnson, and Wilson, art by anyone who can hold a pencil. So, we last issue had a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to recap all of it, but we ended with the Avatar of the White being overtaken by the Furies, and we pick up at that same spot where he's calling out for help, hoping that Green Lantern's going to help him. And in his his attack back at them, he manages to blast away the Avatar of Death, but the Pestilence one is still coming after him, and that's where Alan comes down, and he's like, hey, I heard your call, Sam. And he's like, but I'm not Sam. And he's like, yeah, well, you called me Alan, so I'm going to call you Sam. And the Furies are like, hey, it's still 3 against 2. We still outnumber them. And that's where Solomon Grundy comes back up, being like, you may have chopped me in half, but that just slows me down. So they're going to continue the attack. Alan's like, I can't stay here, though. Like, pieces of the moon are still coming down. It's a whole big thing. And it's like, right, we get that, but we have to find the other avatars of the blue and the red before it's too late. So then we cut over to the avatars saying, hey, the ancient avatar of the blue is awoken. We have to choose another one, though, because that one can't be controlled. But they realize, oops, it's too late. The Avatar has already awoken, and that giant sea creature that Aquawoman released from the tomb or whatever, it just explodes out of the ocean. So the Avatar of the Blue is a Cthulhu demon. So I'm going to assume that you know what happened in Earth 2 number 29, which came out the same week as this, because this picks up immediately afterwards. At the Chicago Stronghold, there's a last train leaving a station. Constantine and his group of people are sitting there watching like, oh, should we get involved? Should we stop this riot that's going on outside the train? Because a bunch of people are like forcing people off and like trying to get their own place on there. It turns out there's a tidal wave coming in from Lake Michigan, and anyone still here in an hour is going to be dead. But they're like, okay, well, looks like all the tickets have sold out. We'll find a different way out. We then cut to Dick Grayson and Barbara are climbing their way onto the train. And in doing so, one of the guys on there kicks her off, and she's like, I'm sick of running. I'm sick of this. She picks up a rock, throws it at the guy, and he's like, big mistake, lady. He pulls out a gun and shoots Barbara. And everyone's caught off guard by this, and even John Constantine, who like was letting it happen and specifically said like she's got some fight in her, she can handle herself. He's then disappointed, saying, "Ah, damn it, John. I would get back to that." But anyway, we then cut down into the fire pits area. We see that Power Girl and Thomas Wayne are very upset about Helena being dead, and Power Girl's even more pissed, being like, I'm not going to let Desaad turn her into one of those sick parademon dogs. We're going to go find her and tear Desaad apart. So they go running down the halls. Lois takes Superman's shield that she found last issue, puts in a little pocket that she's got on her suit. A security droid pops out from inside the wall, shoots at Kara. She just grabs it, knocks it down, says, "Where's Desaad?" It doesn't respond. She crushes its head beneath her boot. And she, immediately, Red Tornado's like, "Kara, And she's like, what? It's only a machine. And she's like, oh, wait, but not you, Lois. You're not just a machine. You're different. And Lois is like, what? No, I don't care about that. Look, come here. And she looks out the window, and down in the lower area of this observation deck is original Clark Kent Kal-El Superman, who is tied into a machine. And Lois is like, tell me this is real. So Lois breaks in to the place, goes down to where Clark is. He wakes up and he recognizes her as Lois, and she's like, oh my God, it's you. It's actually you, Jesus Christ. So Thomas comes down saying like, Clark Kent, the alien god returns. And he looks up and he's like, Bruce? And immediately Thomas is like, nope, punches Clark in the face and says, you were supposed to save us all. Now you're just fueling one of their machines. And Val-Zod jumps in being like, he's off his drugs right now. Don't worry. Don't take what he says personally. It's a whole thing. But as they look at him, it's like, wait a minute, hold on. Dude, you're alive, but you're bleeding. Like, that punch actually made you bleed. So then we go over to New York, where Jay Garrick and his mom are being attacked by Kendra, who's being under the influence of the Furies. Whatever. She's just saying kill, kill, kill. Jay Garrick's mom steps up to the gun-toting Hawkwoman and says, hey, I bet you have someone in your life that you care about, someone who raised you and loved you. You should think about them. And it manages to shake her out of the kill stuff for just a second, enough for Jay Garrick to intervene. And then Dr. Fate comes down with Jimmy Olsen and says, hey, don't worry, I got this. And he takes all of the people's rage and turns it into a thunderstorm, because that's just what he's able to do. So everything is fine for just a moment. We then cut over to Apocalypse, where all of the nukes are being planted by the World Army, but they can't find Mr. Miracle, Barda, and Fury. Turns out that they are flying in their own right to the central chamber of Paternus, who has a key to the Mobius chamber. They fly in. He's the big purple dude who's just a head. And he's just like, ha, you're a bunch of children. You can't do anything to me. But then Fury manages to come in. They start throwing punches and whatnot. As Mr. Miracle comes in, he's like, oh, you have come here for revenge against Darkseid, Mr. Miracle, but you have come against the wrong god. You are just a pawn, and you are the son of two fathers, but also of none. And Mr. Miracle's like, what? Whatever, I'm taking your key. So he rips the key out of Paternus's head, which then causes Paternus's entire body, which was apparently just under the floor of this building the whole time, to emerge outwards. And he's like, oh, stop, you fatherless outcast. And that's where Fury and Barda come in and say, oh, good, now there's more of you to fight. And Barda says, Miss Miracle, go ahead to the Mobius chamber, just as you said he would. So they use the key in Paternus's head, open up the Mobius chamber, which apparently is down to the heart of Apocalypse, and Mr. Miracle says, I'm coming for you, Father, and we will see whose son I truly am today. All right, that's the issue. Fine, whatever, bunch of stuff. Let me talk about Barbara Gordon for a second here, or Barbara Grayson, as she may be known in this continuity. Last issue, there was a bait and switch where they hit her with a goddamn meteorite, and then said, tune in to Earth 2 number 29, to see what happened. And in Earth 2, number 29, she didn't die. She's fine. That's how she's here in this book. They do a whole thing, they bait and switch, and then they're going to the train station. And then they have the gall in this book the very next week to say, okay, she didn't die last issue, but she definitely got shot this issue. I swear to God, if I open up next week's issue and she's alive again, I'm going to riot. Like, this is the worst way to tell a story, is that some critical need-to-know information for the sake of the emotional impact that the scene needs to have is only available in not even the tie-in, the main book that at this point can be functionally ignored because it's nothing but backstory to other things that happen here. That is absolutely not okay. As for the rest of it, whatever. Nothing's really jumping out as good anymore. It's all just kind of like, yeah, all right, avatars and the Constantine plot, which I thought was going to be the most interesting, but already he's doing nothing. So I'm a bit disappointed. The only thing I see some promise in is the fact that Superman is straight up alive again, and I give that all of 2 issues before he's straight up killed again. So yeah, it's frustrating for me. I'm going to give this one a 5.5. and it probably doesn't deserve that, but it just pissed me off so much, that Barbara Gordon plot, that I cannot give it a 6. I will not give it a 6. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this December 3rd, 2014. And as I said in the beginning of the episode, I am literally about to choke on all of the words coming out of my mouth. So I'm just going to wrap this up real quick and nice and easy for you. So next week, we only have 11 comics, and in alphabetical order, they are Batgirl, Batman Eternal, Constantine, Earth 2 World's End, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League United, Clarion, New 52 Future's End, New Suicide Squad, and World's Finest. But also, there is one more that I did skip over intentionally, and that is the Harley Quinn Holiday Special. It's like 50 pages. So even when there's a light week, DC just can't help but rub salt in the wound. Anyway, that's it. As for all the social media stuff, we have a Discord, we have a Patreon, we have a subreddit. If you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation, I'd love to hear it. I got one comment on a video yesterday that was a crypto scam. And that has been pretty much the only comment I've gotten in like the past 2 weeks. So please, I am so lonely. Please talk to me. Anyway, that's it. Do all the stuff. Whatever. I am so tired. I am in so much pain. But I do this show because I love you and because I have nothing better to do. So thank you very much. Please tune in next week. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.